The altar. A smooth path leads to it, where the groom is already standing, right next to the priest's hem. The ceremony guests sit around it, awaiting the bride. The ladies, dressed in luxurious clothes, with wide fans and marvelous hats, discussed the bride and exchanged rumors. One woman said the bride was the daughter of Count F. Seelin, but everyone was surprised by the bride's age. She was 16. The long-awaited girl appeared with a wonderful snow-white bouquet. The buzz among the ladies continued. The girl's age also caused a lot of noise and discussion, but what was most striking was the groom's age compared to his daughter-in-law. The boy was 8 years old. But there must be a reason for such a wedding. It's not just for nothing that an already grown girl will marry a mere child. The girl received a huge sum of money for the wedding. But why did the Duchess choose her? After the Duke's death, it was likely decided to take her friend's daughter, thereby ensuring the young Duke's protection. The wedding was only a name. The boy's future wife bowed to him, and he lifted the bride's veil, following tradition. After the young Duke lifted the veil from the girl's face, the boy was stunned by her beauty. Deep blue eyes, a delicate face, white eyelashes, and luxurious snow-white hair. It was the day they first met. The bride, who hadn't even gone through the coming-of-age ceremony, and the groom, who was only 8 years old, were married without even knowing each other. People continued to whisper. They whispered about their marriage. A marriage that, according to the crowd, was one of convenience. The girl looked at the serious, still short boy. His suit was wonderful, just like her wedding dress. But for the groom, this wasn't the wedding he wanted. The young man stood next to his bride, suspecting absolutely nothing, and also not suspecting how it would all end. The newlyweds were given a box containing 2 wedding rings, but still, the boy took it too seriously. He told her he would take full responsibility and make her happy. He was so sweet when he made that promise, and so reliable for such a little boy. The girl, still hugging the fragrant bouquet of flowers, reciprocated her future husband's vow. She gave him the same promise after all. The couple, newlyweds, held hands with rings sparkling on them. But this promise, which was made under the altar, she will never be able to keep. Her husband sent her a letter informing her that he would be graduating from the academy at the top of his class. He also asked that his wife attend the graduation ceremony. The girl decided to go. She considered herself a bad wife because she couldn't keep her promise, but he kept his. Because those 8 years they were together were the happiest of her life. The girl's eyes, wet with her own tears, closed. She wanted Gainey to be happy like that, to forget about her and meet someone better. He definitely had to be the happiest. It's a cloudy day. It's pouring outside. On a hill stands a gigantic castle, inhabited by a man as handsome as the castle. The dark-haired man jumped out of his luxurious bed. He must have been dreaming. And, apparently, he hadn't exactly dreamed of the end of the rainbow, with gnomes and a chest of gold. The boy's entire muscular body was covered in sweat. The brunette grabbed his hair and tried to catch his breath after what he'd seen in his dream. A cold sweat had broken out on his face. The butler entered the bedroom. The mustachioed man, a rather nice man, was disturbed by the noise in his master's room. Putting on a snow-white robe over his bare torso, the man confessed to his faithful servant about the nightmare that had caused him to wake up and make noise. The butler quickly guessed and asked if there had been a dream about the Duchess, to which he heard a short and clear yes. The servant offered tea, to which the master, after banging his head on the glass, said it was unnecessary, as tea wouldn't help with grief. She appears in his dreams almost every day. The image of his late lover hung in the brunette's mind. He felt as if she were somewhere nearby, calling to him, but even without that, he had never forgotten her. A wonderful red-haired girl caught the sun's rays on her face. If the sun were a person, it was immediately clear what kind of person it would resemble. But suddenly, the girl's name was called. Her name was Nadia. Nadia was sitting at the foot of the bed, and on the bed itself lay a fair-haired woman who, while Nadia was catching the sun, looked at her. The woman turned out to be Nadia's mother. Her mother noticed her daughter's thoughtfulness and asked what had attracted her, but was told there was nothing. Suddenly, Nadia seemed to feel and see a hand touch hers. She confessed to her ailing mother that she felt as if someone was calling her. A serious man sits in his office and sorts through documents, answers, and writes letters. In general, he is busy with paperwork. The brunette tiredly rubbed the bridge of his nose with his thumb and index finger and put the papers aside. The man heard a knock on the heavy, enormous door. Intuitively realizing it was the butler, he allowed entry. The butler came with news. New documents had arrived for the Duke to see. The Duke cursed, asking how a servant could talk about such things when his master was buried in papers. But there was nothing he could do about it. Important documents concerning the Baldwin family and the budget plan. The Duke asked why Allison didn't look through them himself, since he was the head butler, to which he replied that he had no right to do such a thing. This work should be done by the mistress of the family, Allison said, with the direct implication that the master deserves a mistress. So, in the end, so to speak, all roads lead to Rome. The Duke himself must review all the documents. There's no one else. The brunette agreed that, ultimately, it was his job. After all, the mistress's seat would remain empty forever. The butler sighed heavily. The Duke asked if anything interesting had happened the previous night, to which the butler replied that yes, but nothing significant to report. But the Duke insisted. Allison said there was unrest in the border region with Hesse's lands, and it was reported that the population of these lands was digging in a mine. The Duke was terribly angry. He couldn't understand how they could dare to do such a thing. He asked if this family were barons. Ellison answered affirmatively. The family consists of the baron, his wife, and his adopted daughter. The Duke asked again about the adopted daughter. Her name is Nadia Hesse. The butler heard that 10 years ago, they took in a girl found in the forest and raised her. The man was thrown back into his memories. The only thing that kept running through the Duke's head was 10 years ago, and the Duke decided he would go personally to the proceedings. The butler asked if he was planning to go right now, to which the Duke replied, yes, as he wanted some fresh air anyway. The butler went off to prepare for his master's departure. The man walked up to the window and began thoughtfully twisting the wedding ring on his finger. He was thinking about the adopted daughter of the Hesse family. She had somehow captivated him madly. But strangely, he hadn't even seen her, only heard her. The entrance to the mine was located in the mountain. Mines carrying fossils exited the mine. Many people worked hard, swinging heavy pickaxes in search of resources. The two men looked up from their work. They heard praise coming their way. Lady Nadia appeared and asked the workers to drink a glass of water before continuing. The girl seemed to glow with her beauty and kindness. The men immediately began courting the young lady. They were worried. Why would such a girl come to such a place to do servant's work? And what about her dress? It might get dirty. The girl said she had to help somehow, since all the people were working so hard for these lands. The two guys melted right there. Nadia went to another man with exactly the same request, and the two guys watched her and discussed how the girl had grown up wonderful and was very different from the one she was 10 years ago. She was a skinny, quiet girl back then. But when did she grow so big? Then a girl appeared. She told them they had no idea what a fine lady she was. When the Baroness fell ill and became bedridden, the lady assumed control of our lands. Meanwhile, Lady Nadia approached the workers further, offering praise and concern. A girl who also works there said that sometimes, when she looks at Lady Nadia, she's reminded of the Duchess, who was said to have ruled the Baldwin Duchy. The boys agreed. Lady Nadia sensed a presence behind her, and her instincts were right. She turned around abruptly. The girl was stunned. What she saw truly shocked her, as she hadn't expected to see this in the mine. She called out to the little boy, who had turned away in shame and seemed to be curled up into a ball. He was wearing a hard hat and carrying a pickaxe. The boy turned slightly and raised his bashful gaze to the young lady. Nadia asked if the boy had come here to find his father, and added that he was not allowed to enter here as the mine was too dangerous for children. The boy turned to the lady, felt embarrassed again, and decided to object. He had heard that the Baroness had fallen ill. The girl was surprised. The boy continued. He said that this mine helps pay for medicine. He'd heard adults say that. And again the boy looked up and said that he also wanted to make his contribution and be of use. The girl remembered Gainey, who said that he also wanted to help the Baroness. Lady Nadia smiled kindly at the sweet boy. She was surprised by his genuine desire to help. She told him she was truly grateful for such thoughts, but it was okay. The Baroness wouldn't like it. The boy was surprised. Rather than cover the cost of medication with the money earned by her small child, She will declare that she prefers to remain sick in bed. So the baby needn't worry. The lady will also work diligently to ensure his mother's recovery. The girl decided for herself that she would do everything possible to make her feel better, so she would repay the mercy of Baron Hess and his wife. They gave her a completely new life, brighter than the previous one. They did a great deed by taking her in as a baby. On that day, 10 years ago, Lavinia Baldwin died tragically, but no one knows that the dead Lavinia Baldwin woke up in the body of a 10-year-old red-haired girl. As soon as she woke up, she saw in front of her the Baron and Baroness, who were worried about her. They said they found her unconscious in the forest and couldn't leave her there, so they brought her here, no matter what happened to you. The girl doesn't know how it happened, but when she realized that she woke up in a different body, she first thought that never again in her life does she want to go back to the life of Lavinia Baldwin. The boy obeyed Lady Nadia and, throwing the pickaxe over his shoulder, walked away from the mine. There are, of course, things the girl left behind, but she doesn't intend to return for them, because from the very beginning, this was a place that didn't suit her. The Baron and Baroness didn't ask any questions. They believed her when she said she remembered nothing, and they even gave her a name and adopted her. So the girl uses the things she received in Lavinia's life for them. After all, she decided that this is now her real life. Suddenly, everyone panicked and started calling for Lady Nadia. Everyone had no idea what was going on. It turned out the workers had found a magic stone. Everyone was amazed by this find, as they thought they'd only found coal there. The girl thought it was time for them to show up too. Everyone was euphoric. After all, they'd been digging in the same place all along. The girl was worried they might not be there, but she was glad they were. Lady Nadia froze. A rough male voice shouted at her and the workers. 2 tall men appeared on the horizon. They looked menacing. The men had come to find out who had given them permission to dig here. Everyone quickly realized that these guys were Baldwin's knights. The knights scanned the crowd, awaiting an answer. People lined up behind Nadia and turned to her with hope. She told everyone not to worry. Lady Nadia approached the knights and asked what brought them there. The men responded rudely. One knight asked again who had given permission to dig. The girl smiled and calmly replied that these were Baron Hess's lands. They didn't need permission to dig in a mine that belonged to them. The knights didn't understand what was happening. The girl stood in shock. Something she certainly couldn't have expected appeared before her. The men also turned around and stood stunned. Duke Baldwin himself appeared before them. The Duke, or rather Heine, appeared before Nadia in all his glory. The man was thinking about how he had never seen this girl before. He asked Nadia if she was the head of the Hess family. The girl couldn't say a word. She recognized her little Henry in this man. The Duke examined the red-haired girl. He thought about her appearance and felt something inexplicable. The man looked at the girl, examined her fiery red hair, her shabby clothes, and thought she looked about 20 years old. He continued to ponder the fact that she was Baron Hess's adopted daughter. He was seeing her for the first time, but she evoked a very strange feeling. But then Baron Hess himself interrupted him. He was a short man with a mustache and a protruding belly. He began to worry about his beloved adopted daughter. She should have warned him she was going into the mine. And then he noticed the Duke. The Duke sat on horseback. One of the knights approached him and addressed him. The Duke said that the people of the Hessian lands had found magic stones here and asked if there were any magic stones here. The knight replied that yes, but the circumstances were suspicious. The barony of Hesse lacked the resources and information to mine such resources, but they had identified this particular vein. Nadia Hess intervened. The girl apologized for butting into the conversation and interrupting it, and then elegantly grabbed the hem of her dress. The girl bowed and introduced herself, and also expressed her respect to Duke Baldwin. The Baron came to his senses and also bowed before the Duke and expressed his respect. The Duke said that he had heard that Baron Hess had adopted a smart girl, but he had not imagined that she was brave enough to extract magic stones right under the Duke's nose. The crowd behind them immediately began murmuring and becoming worried. Some said they knew they shouldn't have bothered, while others reassured the others that the lady had assured them everything would be fine. And then Nadia Hess began to speak, capturing everyone's attention. She said the mine belonged to the Duchy of Baldwin, but she clearly belongs to the Hess family. The girl spoke with absolute calm on her face, The Duke was very surprised by this statement and asked why the young lady thought so. People believe that this mountain range belongs to the Duchy of Baldwin, as the maps show. But 100 years ago, when the Baldwin and Hesse families were united by marriage, evidence has emerged that the lowest section of the mountain range was gifted to the House of Hesse, and this mine is part of that territory. In other words, the House of Hesse did not encroach on anything. The brunette listened attentively to the girl, listening to every word and sincerely surprised by her intelligence and presentation. He praised her, saying that although she was an adopted daughter, she knew the history of the Hesse family so thoroughly. The girl hid her hands behind her back in embarrassment, nervously fiddling with them, and the Duke added that she remembered events from 100 years ago that no one else would remember. The girl listened to the praise, but at the same time, she felt some distrust or suspicion in the man's voice, which is why she began to get nervous. The father embraced his daughter and began to advertise her to the Duke. He said that when Nadia was a baby, she read a lot and had loved reading since childhood, and that if we were to talk about their family history, she knew it perfectly, cover to cover. The father continued to boast about his daughter, saying she was incredibly smart and the rock of their family, while Nadia became embarrassed. She begged her father to stop. The Duke watched, impassive. The girl finally couldn't stand it and told her father directly to stop, as it was really embarrassing him. The Baron listened and apologized. The girl smiled shyly and glanced at the Duke. The moment was terribly awkward. The brunette looked at the Baron and the girl just as calmly. He was too thoughtful. The Duke approached the Baron and asked him to mark on the map exactly where he believed the border was, and also to send the duchy documentation confirming his earlier claims. As he left, the man said that after reviewing the matter, he would determine whether the Hesse house's claims were justified. And the Duke departed, and father and daughter watched him go. The crowd behind Nadia and the Baron also followed the man with their eyes. The father exhaled, because he was very worried and thought that they really were in for serious problems. He turned to Nadia and said he should have left it to him, because what would have happened if his daughter had been taken away? But Nadia said it was fine, it was her decision, and it was right that she was doing it. The girl added that Duke Baldwin doesn't arrest anyone without cause. Her father said he'd heard the Duke was heartless and cruel, but that's absolutely not true. Well, anyway, it's time for everyone to get back to work. The girl asked everyone to put in a little more effort to help the Baroness. Everyone enthusiastically agreed. The father and daughter went home, and the man thought that he should have looked at these magical stones, too. The girl recalled her past life, and Gainey, who compared her hair to moonlight. His image remained in her mind for a long time. Nadia thought about how much he had grown. She remembered again that to him she was like the moon, but when the girl saw him again, the man was like the sun to her, but still. The girl clutched her pendant in her hand, remaining lost in thoughts about the past. She can't go back to him. She made a promise to herself. Ellison approached the Duke and brought him documents sent by the Barony of Hesse. The documents were checked for material and factual accuracy, and no hint of forgery was found. The Duke asked the butler if they were to contest the rights to the position, what were the chances of winning, to which Ellison replied that if the Baldwin family joined the struggle for the land, they would win. The brunette asked what would happen if we approached this issue fairly. The butler replied that these lands officially belonged entirely to the House of Hesse, and there was no chance of victory. There's a record that House Baldwin granted these lands to House Hesse 100 years ago, and even after all the broken contacts between the families, there's no evidence the land was ever returned. It seems that neither side paid much attention, so this fact was neglected all this time. The Duke asked how Lady Hesse had learned about this place. How had she known that the magical stones were located there? Allison remarked that luck had apparently been on the side of the virtuous Baron and Baroness. They say heaven favors the virtuous. The man became angry at the butler's statements and said that it was complete nonsense. The Duke slammed his fist on the table in anger. He believed that if heaven truly watched over good people, his wife would be alive and happy right now. The butler sighed heavily. He looked down sadly and admitted to his master that he had misspoke. The man sighed and accepted the fact that he had been too hot-tempered. He offered to continue the conversation later. Allison apologized. The Duke walked to the window and looked out wearily. He was deeply saddened by the loss of his wife and was trying to find her. as he couldn't believe she could have died. Lady Hess came to mind. As soon as he saw the girl, he immediately thought of Labinia. Nadia Hess's etiquette was impeccable. Her manner of speech was sharp, but more than that. He thought about this for a long time, and one thing touched him most of all. The way she looked at him reminded him terribly of his beloved Labinia. The man stood by the window and pondered. He must have gone crazy, since there was no resemblance between them. He saw the moon. He saw Labinia in it and turned to her, so that the girl would look at her husband and his condition. A full 10 years have passed since she left, and he still can't let her go. He searches for traces of her in a woman who is completely different from her. Young Lady Nadia sat at her desk in her room, as if she had distanced herself from heavy thoughts and was immersed in work. The girl was reading a book, turning the pages under the light of the moon and candle. Nadia Hess continued to read the material enthusiastically, not noticing anything around her. The only thing that tore her away from this activity was a sound near the window. The girl sharpened her hearing. The wind that blew through the window, through the crack that formed, extinguished the candle that had illuminated most of the room. The redhead began to worry. She clearly felt the presence of someone else next to her, and in an instant, a man dressed entirely in black appeared behind Lady Nadia and placed the blade of his sword right at the young lady's neck. He asked if she had sent the letter. He was angry. How could she pretend to be someone else? Did she not value life at all? The girl appeared completely calm. She said in a lofty tone that a lot of time had passed since their last meeting, but he couldn't even recognize his mistress. What impudence! The lady turned to face him and glanced at Conrad. The huge sword moved closer to the young girl's thin neck, and she remained unperturbed. The man didn't believe her and said that it was quite a bold statement. The man did not believe her and said that his mistress was not someone one could speak about so carelessly. The sword approached Lady Nadia's fragile neck again, but she remained unperturbed. The girl said that she was pretending to be her and smiled at the words she had actually spoken. But if she were an impostor, how could she have forged his mistress's handwriting and known about the key? Conrad listened to the lady. Nadia dropped the sword from her neck and said that he, too, was curious about why he had come all this way. And besides, given the man's personality, he would have ignored the letter. The girl stood up and addressed the attacker by name, saying that people knew him as Viscount O'Delly. The man was stunned. She continued. He had previously been a slave, sold to a gambling house at the age of 5 because of his father's debts. To save your little sister, you entered the game empty-handed, which almost cost you an eye. The only one who saved and preserved his life was Lady Labinia. She looked at him again with a smug look and asked if he remembered this. The man was stunned by the information Lady Hess had just laid out for him. He said that it was impossible. His mistress died 10 years ago, and he saw her body with his own eyes. The girl told Conrad that if he didn't believe her, she wouldn't bother to continue the story. When he was stuck in the gambling house, Labinia asked why he was in such a dirty hole. He was kidnapped, or he made a terrible mistake. Or perhaps. The man lowered his giant sword, thereby showing submission and faith in Nadia's words. He fought and was determined, even though his life was as useless as that of an insect. Conrad interrupted her and said that the one who had accepted this life was his mistress, Labinia. He took a step back. The man pulled down his hood and asked Lady Nadia hopefully, was she truly Lady Labinia? He stepped into the light and showed his face to the girl. Rough, stern, but he showed it. The girl smiled and said that, to be precise, no longer. After death and rebirth, she became Lady Hess. Conrad said that the name did not matter at all, and dropped to one knee before his mistress. He acknowledged that she was his only mistress, and confirmed it by his physical position in front of her. Conrad took her hand and pressed the back of it to his face, expressing the honor of meeting his mistress, Lady Nally, again. The girl was glad he called her by the name she now had, and thought he was disappointed she hadn't immediately started looking for Conrad upon her return. But he denied it. The man said she had reasons for everything, including calling him right now. And that was true. The candle lit up again, illuminating the room even more. The man demanded a new order from his mistress. The girl asked about the key she'd entrusted to Conrad, and whether he still had it. After all, the girl needed it. Conrad said he certainly had the key, but after 10 years, many traces had disappeared. Nadia said it didn't matter and asked him to bring it back as soon as possible. Conrad, with permission, asked what Lady Nadia was going to do, and she briefly answered that she was going to get rewards. The girl plans to catch criminals and collect rewards for them. The key is the evidence the girl collected during Baldwin's life. It allows her to dismantle numerous criminal organizations. She collected and stored it as evidence. Even though some traces have disappeared over time, if there is anything left of those organizations, they can use it to make a fortune. Besides, Nadia was no longer a duchess. She had no honor to lose by embezzling public funds. Conrad asked Nadia about her need for money. The girl needs them because Baroness Hesse is ill. She needs medicine, and it costs a lot. She'd recently found a vein of magical stones, which she'd been saving for an emergency, but she couldn't have too much spare cash. Conrad listened attentively. Nadia asked him if he was interested in why she didn't return to the Baldwin family, right? She said that if she became a duchess again, the cost of medicine would be a mere trifle. Conrad said he couldn't even imagine such a thing. The girl said the reasons were simple. First, she didn't want to make a fuss by claiming Lavinia Baldwin had returned in a different body. Second, even if she resolves the issue, she has personal reasons for not wanting to use the Baldwin family assets, and the girl wanted to continue, and her past life with its memories, terrible memories, stood like a stake in her memory again. She saw her mother begging for help. Her father, according to her mother, had married his mistress and was trying to kill her, and Lavinia said that was impossible. But her mother begged her to believe her. Lavinia's mother scolds her, calling her a bad daughter and not trusting her own mother. The servants were discussing the Countess's death, meaning Lady Louise will now become Countess. She even brought her daughter. But what will happen to Lady Lavinia now? The servant had heard rumors that she had been promised a large sum of money if she married. Wouldn't it be better to prove her worth? The girl returned to this world from her memories and came to her senses. After she walked away, she said that, thirdly, the girl no longer wanted to be Lavinia Fsilin. The girl had completely recovered and relaxed. Nadia didn't want to return to those places, so she decided to live a new life with gratitude. The lady asked if this was a good plan. The man bowed again and agreed, because if his mistress wanted it, he would do it. Conrad froze in this pose and realized that he was right in his thoughts. If anyone finds out that Lady Nadia is Lady Lavinia, she will no longer be able to live in peace. The Duke was spending time in the library. He was sitting on the floor, his back against a bookcase, reading something. He thought about how pathetic he was. Just think about it. His longing for his dead wife led him to read the diary she left behind. Heine sent a letter from the academy to the estate. He wrote that the white flowers, reflecting the moonlight, had a silvery glow on their petals, and that they reminded him of Lavinia. She was curious. She placed the bouquet on the windowsill and waited for the moon to rise. The petals did indeed glow, and she stared at them for a long time. The man reread this. He remembered those flowers. When he saw them, he immediately thought of Lavinia, which is why he ordered delivery, even though he knew I'd be breaking curfew. Lavinia was sorry that Gainey was sending the gift while he was busy studying, but she couldn't hide how much happier it made her. She was delighted to hear that he was doing well at the academy. The man read the notes and felt sad. Lavinia wished Gainey would send her updates more often. Was he getting along with his friends? Was he studying military science well, since he was interested in it? What if he got sick and got hurt? When Gainey was away, she always worried. The man closed the book with a smile and thought that Lavinia was worried about him much more often than about herself. The Duke noticed that a piece of paper, similar to a map, had fallen out of the diary. It turned out to be a map of magical stones. Lavinia must have been marking them. She was more meticulous than anyone else about land matters, so it's quite likely. The man continued to look at the map and tensed slightly when he saw something. He noticed a red mark on the map, and this place is the very same mine where Hesse's people are digging. Judging by the marks on the map, Lavinia knew for sure that the magic stones were there. And most significantly and importantly, Nadia Hesse knew about it too. No matter how much the Duke thought about it, it was highly suspicious. Even if the adopted daughter knew the family's history well, it was rather odd that she'd be aware of things from a century ago that no one else remembered. And what bothered him most was the look. Could this all be just a coincidence? Perhaps. Nadia Hesse definitely knows something about Lavinia. I need to see her. The girl slept soundly, and she dreamed. There was a gigantic estate there, which was astonishing. Little Lavinia ran along the path, her baby shoes visible from the hem of her dress. The girl joyfully ran to her mother with a beautiful bouquet of delicate flowers. The mother stood with a parasol, her back to her daughter. Her silhouette was majestic. Lavinia's mother turned around, for she heard her dear daughter, and in an instant, little Lavinia flies into the arms of her beloved mother. The Countess had a wonderful appearance, long snow-white hair, and her daughter apparently took after her mother. Sharp features. The mother turned to her daughter. She asked who these flowers were for. Did the girl bring them to her or something? The Countess took a small bouquet and expressed her joy, and also said that the flowers were very beautiful. The mother kindly hugged her little daughter and thanked her for the gift. The Countess held Lavinia closer and expressed her love to her. This moment of hugging lasted a long time. The love between a mother and daughter is something inexplicably powerful. The little girl told her mother that she loved her more than anyone in the world. From that day on, she would do everything to make her mother smile. The girl and her mother sat on a luxurious sofa. The Countess told her daughter that the people nearby were their new family. Now, little Lavinia has a new mother and a younger sister, and her mother hoped that they would get along. The girl was terrified by this turn of events. She called the people strangers and clung to her mother. The sparkle in this little girl's eyes was gone. She didn't want a new family. She loved her mother terribly. Lavinia looked at the Countess. Her face was hidden in shadow, but the girl felt as if something had snapped somewhere. From that day on, the smile vanished from the Countess's face. Sometimes she sat silently, staring like a corpse. But on other days, Mom would smash everything she saw in the house. And sometimes, the mother hysterically grabs her daughter by the hands, as if it was not her at all, not that magical mother. She screamed furiously at little Lavinia and begged her to save her in a rage. She told her daughter that the Count and his mistress wanted to kill her and were aiming for the Countess's place. The mistress tried to throw Lavinia's mother down the stairs to kill her. Lavinia said it was an accident, because even the servants said so. Her mother said the mistress tried to poison her. Lavinia said they found no traces of poison and begged her mother to eat to gain strength. Her mother was outraged and said her daughter was taking her mistress's side, but the girl denied it and said she loved only her mother most of all. Lavinia wanted to help the Countess, but her sincerity never reached her mother, and eventually the girl began to understand that she could not stand her mother's madness. During another attack of her mother, the girl tried to escape from the hands of her crazy mother, and she succeeded. The girl broke free and ran away from her mother in fear. The girl ran through the corridors, her adrenaline pumping, but her mother didn't chase after her. Lavinia ran to her room, jumped onto the bed, and pulled her legs up to her chest, sobbing. The servant came to the little girl and spoke to her. Lavinia's mother asked her for something. Her condition worsened until it was too late. Would you like to see her again? The girl's memory instantly flashed to her mother, who, in a fit of anger and fury, was yelling at her. A cold sweat broke out on her. Her eyes opened, and fear paralyzed her body. Lavinia, tearful, agreed, because she understood that in any case it was her mother. The servant saw the girl's condition. He felt genuine pity for her. The man nodded to the girl. Words cannot describe how painful this sight was. He apologized. The girl, also trembling, tried to calm down, but to no avail. She was very scared. The Countess lay on the bed in the middle of the room in a terrible state. The mother said the girl's name and raised her hand, which showed that life was leaving her. The Countess was constantly looking for the girl. She called her as if she were crazy, and she continued to call for her daughter until life finally left the Countess's body. It's a cloudy day, it's raining, and everyone is wearing black, holding umbrellas. They've gathered near the church. The priest stood over the coffin containing the Countess's body and said something unintelligible. The crowd watched the priest. Everyone was in mourning. Among the crowd was little Lavinia, grief-stricken. The girl's gaze was either on the floor or on the coffin of her dead mother. The death of her mother, of course, broke the girl's heart, literally killing her. The girl stood there as the crowd of people left, thinking about her mother. On the other hand, this little girl is finally free from her mother's madness, from the monster. The girl's stepsister looked at Lavinia with crazy eyes. Suddenly, this girl pointed her finger right at little Lavinia. The girl stood and simply pointed her finger at Lavinia, who was in a state of mixed feelings. Lavinia wandered the estate at night with a candle in her hand. The girl couldn't sleep. The girl wanted to get some fresh air. Maybe it would help. She heard someone rejoicing over her mother's death. The girl saw a crack in the door and found her mistress and the Count there. They talked about how persistent she was, about bribing servants, about poison, and how much money they'd spent. The Count said that it was okay. She was a noble lady, and without such efforts, they would have been discovered. Well, since everything went as planned, the Count suggested that they drink and enjoy themselves and forget about their problems. They clinked glasses of wine, and the Count congratulated his mistress on her new status. Little Lavinia was simply amazed by what she had just learned. She realized how it all was, that her mother was not crazy, but was telling the truth. The girl's mother's voice immediately appeared in her head, reproaching Lavinia for not believing. Mom's voice said that they had tried to kill her. She had asked Lavinia to save her, but she didn't believe her. The voice continued. If Lavinia had loved her, she wouldn't have left her mother alone in her final days. Her coldness had killed her own mother. Besides, Lavinia, she didn't shed a single tear. Not a single tear before his own mother's coffin. Monster. Nadia woke up abruptly and screamed. The dream she'd seen had stunned her. She tried to catch her breath. Nadia Hess hugged herself, repeating that everything was fine, to calm herself down. The girl was shaking with terror. She still couldn't catch her breath. But no, she's no longer Lavinia, she's Nadia Hess. In the morning, the Baroness, who had been feeling ill, woke up. She sat up and began looking out the window. The door opened. Nadia's adoptive mother heard it and paid attention. Nadia entered the room with a tray of medicine. She said it was time to take her medication and asked how Mother had slept. The Baroness straightened up and looked at Nadia. The woman looked very stately, despite her illness. She thanked Nadia for her care in the mornings, when she could have simply asked a maid to do it. But Nadia insisted on bringing them to her herself. The girl longed to talk to her mother for the first time in a long time. Lady Nadia began mixing the medicine. She asked how the Baroness was feeling, and she replied that she had improved since she began taking the medicine regularly. The Baroness needs to get well soon so she can look after the estate, the Baroness said. Nadia has worked so hard, at an age when she should be enjoying her youth like other young ladies. Mother drank her medicine with pleasure and left the empty jar. And then Mom brought up an interesting topic. She told Nadia it was time to start looking for a marriage partner. The mother watched her daughter's reaction with interest. But Lady Nadia turned away and became embarrassed. Mother began asking questions. Had someone already appeared to whom Nadia was ready to give her heart? If that was the lady's decision, Mother would support her no matter what, regardless of his status or title. The girl said there was nothing of the sort. Nadia began to ponder who she was willing to entrust her heart to. If she could choose, it would definitely be. Henry's image appeared in her memory. She would have given him her heart. However, Nadia did not expect that they would meet like this. The moment was once again imprinted in my memory. Gainey on horseback, and Nadia looking at the now grown-up guy. He's grown up so much. It's true, isn't it? When this little boy became so grown up, the youth in his voice completely disappeared. The mother watched her daughter, who was lost in her thoughts. Thoughts, of course, about Gainey. Mom smiled sweetly, because she understands youthful love perfectly. The Baroness took Lady Nadia by the hands and addressed her. She knew the girl had always strived for the Baroness, the Baron, and the estate. However, and Mom said with a bright smile that she also wanted Nadia to smile. Lady Nadia was surprised by this. She was very pleased to hear such a thing from her mother. Mother gently squeezed the girl's hand and added, Nadia is the heir who will manage the Hess legacy. Mother is always grateful for Nadia's hard work, but she asks her not to overdo it. To her father, mother, and all the people of the Hess estate, Nadia is a truly amazing girl, the redhead thought. She remembered her mother in her past life, and in this one. Her mother's reproaches, which had appeared shortly before and after her death, came back to her mind. Realizing that this was the past, the girl smiled with relief and exhaled. Nadia understood that she could only live here, at the Hess estate. Lady Nadia left her mother's room in a good mood with the same tray, but without the full bottles of medicine. The girl was walking down the stairs and heard some distant voices that interested her. Nadia looked around, searching for the source of the noise, and spotted her father and servant with a pink-haired girl standing beside them. The lady didn't understand what was happening. The girl exuded joy and kindness from a kilometer away. She stood with a suitcase. And then this arriving girl noticed Lady Nadia and was terribly happy. The girl waved her hand at the young lady, which was a little strange from an etiquette standpoint. The young lady who arrived greeted Nadia and introduced herself. Her name is Vivian. She will be serving Lady Nadia. Vivian was simply sparkling. She exuded energy, and it was completely unclear whether she was from our planet or not. The father became alarmed and decided to explain everything to Nadia. It turned out that this girl had appeared out of nowhere and said she would be his servant. But Vivian corrected the Baron and said that it was not from nowhere. Vivian shared that she had come here on her master's orders. After all, the young lady was Viscount Odeli's savior. Nadia was surprised by this turn of events, but calmed down, because now it was clear where this lady was from. The Baron had no idea what was happening, so Vivian told a fictitious story. Not long ago, the Viscount had been in an accident while driving past the Hesse estate. At that moment, Lady Nadia, who happened to be passing by, rushed to help. Thanks to Lady Nadia, Viscount Odeli was able to avoid serious injury. Vivian imagined in her head a young guy named Viscount, and of course, Nadia, who saves him. Vivian told this story with pride, as if she herself had saved the Viscount. As a token of his gratitude, the Viscount sent Vivian to Baron Hesse's house and ordered her to take good care of his lady. Then suddenly, Vivian made an interesting gesture, grabbing her mistress by the hand. Vivian looked at Nadia and asked if she understood everything that was happening. Of course, Nadia understood, but she didn't understand the girl's behavior. It was as if she had truly come from heaven or another planet. Nadia got into character. She asked the Viscount to allow them to have a personal maid in their situation. He truly showed great kindness. It would be rude to refuse. The girl decided to accept her attractive maid. Vivian was happy. The father and the servant were completely stunned. Nadia went to teach the servant her duties around the house, so she wouldn't become a burden. The Baron turned to the servant and asked if he had come to them like that. But the servant replied that it hadn't been that chaotic, and that since it was the lady's decision, everything should be fine. The girls reached Lady Nadia's room, and the young girl opened the door. Vivian turned to the young lady and asked how she was doing. The maid was worried about whether she looked good in the presentation. Nadia said it was fine, but grabbing the hand of the mistress she serves is improper behavior for a servant. Vivian will keep that in mind. Nadia also added that it's not a good idea to address her by her first name. It's better to call Nadia Milady, even when they're alone. The lady told Vivian that Conrad had sent her a very smart girl. Vivian said of course, because Viscount Odeli would go through fire and water without hesitation when it came to Nadia Hesse. Nadia understood that he would send his most capable subordinate. Nadia turned to the maid again, and she looked at the lady as if bewitched. The girl asked, "What is a maid's best skill?" "She needs to understand how to make the most of her." Vivian smiled slyly, almost as if she were a hunter. Here she revealed something that didn't quite fit her appearance. Vivian specializes in murder. Lady Nadia was very surprised by the abilities of her newly minted servant. The young woman was shocked. Conrad had dispatched the killer as a servant. Vivian said the boss had also entrusted her with Nadia's protection. The maid knelt down on one knee and said that from now on she would be Nadia's eyes, ears, and any other necessary part. Vivian will do whatever she's told. Intimidation, protection, information gathering, persuasion, even assassination, as that's her specialty. The redhead said she doubted she would be in danger in the Hessian lands, but the information obtained in the light and in the dark differs, so the girl is confident that the maid's skills will be useful. For this reason, Conrad uses the identity of Viscount Odeli. Vivian began to beg the lady for a task with great enthusiasm, but she said that there was nothing for her yet. The maid was very upset. At this point, Nadia could only send her to collect her reward. But someone else could do that. Vivian, upset, told Nadia that the boss had said that many interesting things were happening around Lady Hesse. It's bad, but nothing can be done. Vivian came here as a servant. Is the work of an ordinary maid really hard for Vivian? Vivian turned to Nadia, her whole demeanor indicating that something was about to happen. "What are you talking about?" Vivian asked, already standing with a mop in her hand. Vivian said she was good at everything, and being a maid was just a trifle to her. The girl became so engrossed in the killings that she forgot about her main job as a maid. She vowed that she, Vivian, would become a maid worthy of being remembered for the rest of her life. Nadia praised her for her reliability. She was simple and easy to talk to. Vivian peppered her mistress with questions. Should she start with cleaning the room? Or the laundry? Maybe with washing the dishes? But those were the duties of ordinary maids. Nadia asked her to come to the table and organize her documents. The lady was too busy to deal with them. They were important documents, so she couldn't entrust them to ordinary maids. Vivian looked at the paperwork. She asked Nadia if she was handling it alone. It seemed like there were more paperwork than Conrad had. But Nadia's mother was ill, and her father had always suffered from this kind of work. And recently, the amount of paperwork has increased. Nadia plans to expand the magical stone mining project. Vivian said she'll organize everything so well that she'll find everything at a glance. Nadia went to rest and left everything in the hands of the maid. Now the lady has a vein, a club, and a very reliable servant, which makes her happy and calm. This is a good start, so the lady hopes that everything will go just as smoothly from now on. Vivian, while digging through the documents, noticed something and immediately turned to my lady. At this time, Nadia was sitting relaxed on the sofa and thinking about her plans. The maid showed the envelope and said it looked like an invitation. Did she check it? Milady was very surprised, because she had not noticed any invitations anywhere before, and asked where it was from. Vivian said she was from the Baldwin house. Nadia was both horrified and shocked. It was too unexpected. The letter read, "Having survived the winter cold, we welcome the warmer season and renew our garden. We hope the neighboring lands will join us in welcoming the new spring with a garden party." Lady Nadia took the invitation in her hands and noticed the handwriting. This isn't Gainey, this is the Grand Duchess Baldwin. After recovering her health, she often hosted garden parties. She really hasn't changed. I wonder if she's doing well now. Vivian looked at the thoughtful milady, wondering what had prompted Nadia to react so ambiguously. Vivian asked if my lady would go to this party, but Nadia, with a calm face, said that she would not go. The maid looked at Nadia in confusion. She still missed the Grand Duchess Baldwin and her warm smile, but she vowed never to return as Libenia Baldwin. The maid thought it was at least interesting, since the Duchess was throwing a party. It's too bad. The Baldwins don't show up in public at all. Nadia asked if it was true that the Baldwins never showed themselves in public. Vivian was surprised that my lady didn't know about it. Mr. Baldwin never attends parties except those thrown by the imperial family. And they don't throw parties. Nadia asked how long ago it had been. The maid replied that it might have been since Lady Libenia died. About 10 years. What could this mean? Gainey was alone for 10 years? Managing family finances is important. And more than that, Gainey said his father was a quiet but very polite man. He always said that when he had children, he wanted to be a father like him. He dreamed of a happy family. Maybe he blames himself for Libenia's death? Since the accident happened on the way to the academy, Gainey was a very sensitive child, so this scenario is quite possible. Nadia clutched the letter. For the same reason, he couldn't marry again. The girl turned to Vivian and said she had changed her mind. The maid was surprised but delighted. Nadia is getting ready to go to a party. While she's replying, she asked Vivian to get her dress ready. She also needs her evening dress hemmed, so Nadia asked to inspect that too. Vivian was thrilled with the changes. She realized what needed to be done with the dresses. The maid began to select a color. What style would suit a party dress? My lady could entrust everything to Vivian. Nadia decided to ask Gainey directly why he stopped appearing in society and why he remarried. A stately woman with an aristocratic posture looked at the painting. It was Duchess Baldwin. She thought something serious had happened, since Henry was asking her to host a party. Henry apologized to his mother for the surprise. But my mother reacted warmly. On the contrary, she was delighted with the party. Many years have passed since the Baldwin family opened its doors to the public. Several responses have already been received. It seems everyone is looking forward to it. It's been about 10 years since the estate hosted a party. Mother said that when Heine was studying at the academy, this girl, Mother meant Libenia, often accompanied them. The man tensed. Yes, it wasn't boring at all then. So thought the Duchess, with a sense of melancholy. She always brought life to the estate. This should be doubly joyful, so that the Duchess could compensate for the time spent in bed. But her true intention was rather different. The Duchess says that since she let his father die, Lavinia tried to do everything so that the Duchess would not feel lonely. Duchess Baldwin missed Lavinia. She was such a lively child. That's why the Duchess was surprised when Henry asked to host a party at the estate. She asked if Gainey was finally ready to forget her and find someone else. The Duke's face immediately turned to stone with fear. He couldn't even imagine such a thing was possible. Henry said that if his mother was thinking about her successor, she was tormenting him. The young man bared his teeth at his mother and said that she knew perfectly well that Lavinia would be his only wife. Duchess Baldwin, without hope, stopped torturing her son with this. She understood how hard it was for him, but she still asked again why he decided to throw the party. The man answered without hesitation, "Because of Lavinia." But this is truly confusing. If Duke Baldwin throws a party, everyone will think it's a way to find a bride. He still says it's for his dead wife? Mom asked again. What's he still chasing after? And was this party part of it? It was hard for her to watch her son suffer. The man was not hiding anything at all. He answered with a short yes. But at the same time, this yes was an indicator of his indestructibility. Mom asked if there were any results. Gainey said nothing special, but maybe, perhaps Baron and Baroness Hesse adopted my wife, Lavinia. There's some information, which only he knows, if it's not a coincidence. The man was smart and quickly guessed what was what. Henry said that they might eventually find some clue at this party. The Duke of Boldute's estate was simply incredible. The enormous building with its Gothic-style annexes was astonishing. Lady Nadia was getting ready for a party, and like all girls, she was worried about her appearance before such an event. The girl was wearing an incredibly beautiful dress. Nadia asked if Vivian had really altered it herself. It turned out that she had. Many young ladies wanted to attend the Baldwins' party, so the maid was told it would take forever to repair the dress, so Vivian tried to make it herself. Nadia was shocked by Vivian's abilities. Vivian asked Lady Nadia how her outfit was. She was very concerned, asking about comfort. She paid particular attention to her shoulders and waist. Lady Nadia looked at her maid with a kind smile. She was incredibly pleased by her care. Nadia said her skills were impressive, and she felt very comfortable. From now on, the lady would often ask Vivian for help. The maid said her ladyship could count on her. But more importantly, Vivian thought that Nadia was hungry, so she decided to cook her something, and the lady agreed. Well, since Vivian has moved away, we can begin to act according to plan. The girl initially came here for Henry's sake, to ask him questions. In the girl's head, an image of a courageous man, already an adult Heine, appeared. A wonderful gazebo stood in the very heart of the garden. It looked very pretty. Lady Nadia walked and looked around the garden, also looking for Heine. The young lady walked around and looked at the things she had planted there, some of which remained the same, but some have changed. The horse statue has disappeared, leaving behind only an empty space. It's just been a long time, but the parties thrown by the ducal house are still as magnificent as ever. Nadia noticed Henry in the company of two ladies, and one of them praised the beauty of the garden. The man turned in profile, and the girl was absolutely sure that this was her Gainey. Good heavens! The girl felt what she had felt when they met near the mine. He had become so grown up and completely different from the child he had been. Nadia continued to watch the man from afar, remembering what a little boy he was. The girl stood motionless and continued to think, but apparently the Duke sensed something was wrong. Yes, that's how it was. He turned around and looked questioningly at Nadia, whom he noticed. She was terribly embarrassed, because she understood how it looked, as if she was strange or something. She didn't know what to say. Her tongue seemed to be tied from awkwardness, but she did it anyway. The girl bowed, introduced herself, and said it was a great honor to meet the Duke and thanked him for the invitation. The man listened to her greeting and sipped his drink as if nothing had happened. He added that they had met again. Henry asked the lady if she liked the atmosphere at the party, to which the girl replied yes. However, she had not attended many parties, and this was the most beautiful one she had been to. She asked the Duke if he probably attended a lot of social events, to which he replied, "Not really." The girl started asking him questions. Why? He should go to them to meet good people. Of course, it will probably be difficult to attend everything, but for the good of the Duke and his family. But Henry interrupted her and said that she shouldn't worry about it. This answer left the girl a little stunned, but she got out of it and apologized to him. The girl's hand reached towards the table, and she took a delicious piece of cake. The girl believes Lavinia Baldwin might have said something similar, but not Nadia Hess. For Heine, she's now simply the daughter of a neighboring baron. The girl tried the pie, and it turned out to be very tasty, with walnuts. Genrich also took a piece of cake and remarked that Nadia liked it. She agreed. The walnuts were delicious, and the sauce was quite sweet. Then the girl realized something. They were serving walnut-based food at the party. She looked at Henry, who was about to put a piece of cake in his mouth. The girl was instantly overcome with panic and began to worry terribly. And then, in an instant, her hand flew up towards the Duke at the speed of light. Nadia grabbed his hand and pulled him away so that he couldn't eat the cake. She screamed that it was walnut pie, still holding his hand, not letting him bring the dessert. The man didn't fully understand what was happening. He said that he knew what the pie was about. He said the party was being held at his estate, so how could he possibly not know what the food was served with? The girl tried to get out of it, saying he might have been busy and hadn't been able to check everything. The man got angry and bit into a piece of walnut pie. When Gainey was little, he once ate walnuts and became terribly ill. That's why walnuts were banned from the Baldwin estate. The man was eating, and the girl stood there and didn't understand what was happening. Henry asked if there were any problems, but she couldn't understand why he was okay. The girl said that she had made a fuss in vain and apologized to Duke Baldwin. The Duke looked at the girl, and his suspicions became more and more correct. He asked how the girl knew. Lady Nadia pretended not to understand what the Duke was talking about, but in reality, she was burning with shame. The man approached her and said that there was a time when he could not eat walnuts, but it was top secret even within the estate, so few people knew about it. Who told her this? The girl wanted to say something, but the Duke interrupted her. Actually, he wanted to ask something. There was something suspicious about the vein of magic stones Nadia had recently found. The records concerning the veins contained information known only to his deceased wife. Did she really learn this while studying history? Nadia remained silent. He thought that the girl apparently didn't want to answer now, since she was silent. Finally, he added that Lady Nadia Hess should not forget that he was watching her. The girl was surprised by this turn of events. She even felt a little scared. And then, very fortunately, Vivian came running. She said that she had been looking for her for a long time and had finally found her. The girl was incredibly happy about her appearance. She was saved. Lady Nadia told the Duke that she would go and apologized again for her rudeness, and she and Vivian left. The girls walked into the crowd of people, trying to walk realistically, and not as if they were running away from Henry. The man watched them go and grinned. He was very interested in Nadia. Vivian was worried about Nadia, having seen the state she was in. Nadia thought she was an idiot for behaving like that, for showing she knew about the Greek's flaws. What was she thinking when she grabbed Gainey's hand? He already suspected her because of the vein of magic stones. From now on, he had to be more careful. Vivian noticed people. A man with an easel and a couple of women. Vivian told Milady that he still hadn't learned his lesson. But Lady Nadia didn't understand what she was talking about and asked. It turned out to be Viscount Roig, an art swindler. He'd been caught defrauding other nobles, and Vivian had heard he'd been released due to lack of evidence. Apparently, only the grave can straighten a hunchback. Nadia asked why they'd let him go. He'd pretended he didn't know they were fakes when he sold them. He even fled during his trial, and a bounty was placed on his head. But apparently, even that was put on hold after he appealed to their sympathy. What a disgrace! To pull off such a scam right in the middle of the Baldwin's party, that's incredibly bold. Then Nadia heard a snippet of a conversation between the man and the ladies. He was saying that if they bought this painting, even the Baldwin family would admire them. This work of art couldn't simply be bought with money. He said that he only sold to those who knew how to appreciate art, like the beautiful ladies standing before him. The Viscount said they needed to at least hear the name. The painting he brought them. But then Nadia Hess intervened. She apologized for interrupting and asked if she could look at the painting. She said this painting, which is said to rival even the Baldwin's fame. She's interested. Work that rivals Baldwin's fame interests her greatly. Roig said he didn't mean to offend the lady, but this painting would be quite expensive. It's not the kind of painting a lady like Nadia would buy. Vivian was nearby. She wanted to object, but she saw in Nadia's eyes that she needed to play along. And Vivian managed it, saying that my lady had certainly earned a little money, but she couldn't spend it like that. Nadia objected, saying it was just a painting. Vivian said it didn't matter. What good was buying it here? Nadia said it was fine. It was the extra money she'd gotten from the magical stones in the mine. Vivian wanted to object, but the lady interrupted her. Roik hadn't intended to show her off, but Nadia was apparently a reliable person, so he decided to make an exception for her. Roik thought she'd gotten rich by luck. Nothing could be easier than ripping off a newly rich woman like her. He said she would be shocked when she heard it. The girl was surprised. Is this true? Of all the possible paintings, why bring this one? Nadia feigned joy. She couldn't even imagine. She thought this painting had disappeared many years ago. Roik said some paintings were hard to find, but there wasn't a single one he hadn't gotten his hands on. Nadia said it was impressive, and she'd take it. The Viscount was surprised. She'd never even seen it. The lady said it was a rare painting, so she had to buy it before anyone else offered it more. She demanded that I sign a contract immediately. Is that possible? The man said there was no problem with that. She was quite brave. He was thinking about how easy it was to fool newbies. They were so stupid. Roik said that he would bring the contract right now, and the two girls stayed to wait for him. The Viscount was already wandering through the crowd with the contract, searching for the girl. And he found her, but the girl was already standing with the Duchess of Baldwin and talking pleasantly. From the outside, it seemed that they were close. He said he had been looking for her for a long time. The man became very nervous when he saw them. He turned to Lady Baldwin. And Lady Nadia was delighted. He had arrived just in time. As it turned out, the girl wanted to give the painting she'd purchased to the Duchess. She said she was very curious to see what kind of artwork Lady Hesse would give her. Mentally, the man had already refused and run away from such a deal. But physically, no. He stood and clutched the contract in his hands. The man tried to wriggle out of it, again mentioning whether it was too early to give the painting to the lady since she hadn't seen it yet. But Nadia said she already had. The Duchess was already delighted that she would soon receive the imperial bird. Wait. The Duchess turned to Hesse. Wasn't the job she'd told her about Pamela's imperial bird? Nadia said it was true. As soon as Viscount Royce said he'd found it, she immediately wanted to buy it. The Viscount is worried. This contract is written mostly in his favor. If he shows it to Lady Baldwin, he'll be caught red-handed. The work is practically theirs. Then Vivian snatched the contract from the Viscount without any ceremony. He was surprised. Mrs. Baldwin watched the proceedings with a stern expression. The Duchess turned to Royce, who was already sweating from nerves. She asked where and how he had found their lost painting, which had been missing for about 100 years. The man said it was through an acquaintance and inquired why the lady was interested. The Duchess said there had been a recent rise in fraud in the arts, affecting both nobles and ordinary people. She asked if he had any connection to this. The Viscount swallowed. He said the lady was scaring him with her jokes. He was no swindler. The woman listened to him, and he continued. How could he even think of conning the Baldwin family? Indeed, the Duchess was offended that he even thought of it. The lady ordered the guards to take him away. The Viscount resisted. How could they suspect him of such a thing without evidence? Even if she was an aristocrat with a high title, she couldn't just imprison an innocent man. And then a menacing voice suddenly rang out. Lady Nadia and Vivian were struck by this tone and by the events that were happening right now in general. Mrs. Baldwin stood before the Viscount. What shamelessness, selling the imperial bird. The woman raised her voice. The original imperial bird has been kept in the Baldwin residence since the very beginning. Do I have to show it to him to make him believe it? It can't be. How could they have found such a painting that no one had been able to find before? Lady Nadia turned on all her acting skills and began to sob hysterically. The Viscount had deceived her. Vivian began to calm her ladyship. People gathered and watched as Roik was arrested. They immediately guessed why this swindler had been caught. The man's face said it all. He clearly regretted only being caught. The man was led in disgrace through the garden, while crowds of people watched him and his guards. Lady Nadia emerged from her poor girl guise. She asked Vivian if she had performed well enough. The Duchess and Nadia exchanged pleasantries and apologies for what had happened. But then Lady Baldwin was called out. It turned out to be Henry. He came because he heard that a nobleman was causing a disturbance. Lady Nadia was instantly stunned when she saw him. She felt terribly awkward in front of him. The girl began to examine his face again. Little Gainey had become a man. Again and again, the girl was amazed by him. Nadia thought she didn't want to cross paths with him anymore. The Duchess, however, said Lady Hesse had almost been deceived by Viscount Royce. The man said it was quite unpleasant. His eyes immediately took on a stern look. Henry said he was glad everything had worked out well. He would take care of the rest and let his mother rest. Heinrich prepared to walk Nadia home, which she tried to object to, but Heine insisted. Out of politeness, she had to agree. She wasn't entirely happy about it, but she had to. The man led her to the carriage. He began to thank her for uncovering Viscount Royce. Nadia said it was his mother who had done it, but Henry said that without her, he would never have been found. The man also expressed surprise that even a smart girl like Nadia almost fell for this deception. The girl gave the Duke her hand and said that it was her fault that the girl believed the Viscount without even seeing the painting in person. Still holding the man's hand, the girl added that even if she had seen it, she would never have determined that it was a fake. Nadia would have simply thought this was a sweet picture of beautiful lovers. The man paused. The Duke said he would definitely thank her again, but later, and asked her to invite him to the Hesse estate sometime. The girl said she would definitely do so when the opportunity presented itself, but she was terribly nervous inside. The girl sat down in the carriage and looked out the window, watching what was happening outside the carriage. Vivian turned to her lady and asked what she would do if Lady Baldwin did not have the original painting. The girl smiled sweetly and said, as if nothing had happened, that she already knew it existed. Vivian was surprised and asked where from. Lady Nadia said it was a secret. A picture of Lavinia appeared in her memory, next to a piece of art covered with a sheet. Nadia could not have not known about this painting, because she herself found it 10 years ago. The girl wondered why Gainey didn't marry again. It made sense. She was also surprised by Royk's courage. While Nadia was thinking about all this, Vivian said that her facial expression was both beautiful and so scary. The carriage drove away into the sunset, away from the Baldwin estate. Vivian told Nadia that she was glowing. Henry watched the carriage pass. Ellison asked him if the Duke had achieved what he wanted from the party. The man replied that he had achieved even more. Gainey told the butler that Lady Nadia knew about his walnut allergy. Ellison was very surprised. After all, it was the estate's best-kept secret. Besides, Henry no longer has that allergy. Gainey said that's exactly the point. He doesn't, but it seems she didn't know about it. The man stood thoughtfully in the same place, pondering what had happened and what had been said that day. However, she is aware of a closely guarded imperial bird that is kept at the Baldwin estate. How did she discover a mine that only Lavinia knew about? Gainey wondered if it was a coincidence. Now he's sure. There is something between Lavinia and Lady Hesse that the man does not know. Allison asked if he thought it wouldn't be better to ask Lady Hesse directly where she learned about such things. The man replied, "Who knows? But even if not today, perhaps he will appear soon." That's exactly what the Duke thought. He'll have to visit Lady Hesse again. The girl sat in the carriage and laughed along with Vivian. Baron Hesse's estate certainly looked much more modest than the Baldwin's estate, but it also turned out to be attractive. Lady Nadia was sitting by the window and attentively reading some interesting letter, sitting on a luxurious chair. Vivian approached Nadia and said that this was a letter from the Duke's residence. What did it say? It was about a con artist they caught at a party, and compensation from Viscount Royce would soon arrive. It also says that the girl should no longer worry if something was weighing on her soul. As expected, his lordship is truly a kind man. He could have simply written about the result, but he was also concerned about the lady's feelings, and she smiled as if she had received a love letter. Vivian asked if it was possible they'd get married soon at this rate. Nadia was very surprised by these words. She was not just surprised, she was amazed by Vivian's assumptions, but she immediately came to her senses so as not to arouse suspicion, and said that this could not be. A wedding? Nadia asked her not to say such nonsense again, that it would never happen, and Vivian obeyed. Nadia continued to stare at the letter. Vivian, however, was thinking that Lady Nadia clearly liked the Duke in a romantic way. Vivian looked at her ladyship in the same way. She thought there was something more to it, but she was sure the lady knew what she was doing. Coal carts were leaving the mine as before. A voice ordered everyone to rest. The Baron and his daughter visited the mine. The workers thanked them. Her father asked if Nadia was going to the market after visiting the mine. She said yes, because she needed to sell some of the magic stones she'd found. That shop paid the most, so it was worth selling everything there. The girl asked the Baron what he thought about buying and installing magic lamps in each mine. That would make working safer. Her father said it was a wonderful idea, and since they will now need to interact more frequently with other lands, the Baron should also consider maintaining his noble status. The man was being measured for tailoring. The Baron received such a large sum and initially panicked, having no idea what to do. Her father told Nadia that she was truly smart, unlike the Baron himself. The man said he was truly glad they had Nadia. The girl was incredibly pleased to hear that from someone so close. When Nadia was Libania, her father was always yelling at her and looking at her with disdain when she spoke. A memory flashed back to Nadia of her enraged father scolding her for belittling him. His gaze was always very stern towards the girl. She was terribly afraid of her father, but soon the girl calmed down, because this is the past that will never be repeated, and now she has a loving family. Even though she's not his real daughter, her father always respects everything she says. The man asked the girl if his new suit suited him, and the girl was delighted and said it looked great. In any case, with the compensation they received for the magic stones, they'll be able to buy medicine for their mother. From now on, Nadia should work harder for her beloved family and estate. Suddenly, some carriages appeared at the gates of the Hesse estate. Lady Nadia didn't understand what was happening. They weren't expecting any guests, but the girl recognized the man who had arrived. It was Baron Barden. At first, he didn't even recognize the lady. The Baron said the little girl had grown up and turned into a beautiful lady. The girl, however, said that much time had passed. Nadia's father emerged from the carriage and asked what brought Baron Barden here. As soon as Baron Barden saw Baron Hesse, he smiled slyly. The unexpected guest was surprised by Baron Hesse's new appearance and said how well he was doing. The Baron looked slightly embarrassed and said he was still the same. Rather than stand outside, his father suggested they go inside for a cup of tea. Barden said it was a good idea, since he had a lot to tell. While the men were walking inside, Nadia noticed how the soles of the visiting Baron's shoes had come loose. This was strange, since he was a nobleman. Nadia clearly suspected something. He looked very strange, and this Baron was behaving very strangely. Vivian came out and thanked Nadia for her hard work. But who was this man? Baron Barden, and her father considered him a longtime friend. However, the lady doubts the Baron feels the same way. Barden only comes when he wants to ask his father for an investment, and his soft-hearted father can never refuse. Therefore, he has lost a lot because of the Baron. Vivian was furious. She said it was sheer outrage. The girl asked if they should throw him out right now. But Lady Nadia objected, saying it could harm their reputation and her father's pride. So for now, Lady Nadia suggested keeping an eye on the situation. Nadia gave something to Vivian and told her to leave it on the windowsill in the living room where her father was. Vivian asked what it was. It's a listening device. Nadia once gave Conrad a magic stone from the mine, and he did it. A listening device made from a magical stone for a lady. Vivian smiled and said that the boss really idolized Lady Nadia. Vivian listened to her ladyship and immediately rushed to carry out the assigned task. The girl only had time to glance after her maid for a second. Lady Nadia was worried that everything would go according to plan and nothing would go wrong. The inside of the estate was as magical as the outside. A magical corridor led to the room where the father and the Baron were staying. The men drank tea, and the Baron said Hesse was lucky. Who would have thought that magical stones would suddenly be found on his land? Father said it was truly a blessing. Perhaps fortune favors those who live carefree lives, like my father, rather than those who are always busy. Perhaps fate hasn't completely abandoned us yet. Baron Hesse asked his guest what he meant, but Barden laughed and said nothing. The visitor coughed demonstratively, put down his cup of tea, and said that since Baron Hesse's fortune was growing every day, he offered to increase it even more. A sly smile flashed across his face. He developed a business plan and announced that he would only tell his dear friend, Nadia's father, about it. In the far north, deep in the giant mountains, Amid fierce winds and cold, a fruit grows. Some people call it the northern fruit. Hess asked if fruit really grew in such a place. The Baron replied that yes, it only grew very rarely on this mountain, and they said it could cure everything. If Hess found it, the Baroness's illness could be cured. Hess asked if this fruit alone could end his wife's suffering. Barden assured him that it was indeed so. He added that he wouldn't lie to his best friend. Meanwhile, Nadia Guess heard everything, eavesdropping through a wire. The girl was clearly upset by this Baron's manipulation. It's very unkind to use the illness of a loved one to exert pressure. She said that maybe he wasn't lying, but he absolutely always hid his true intentions. Starting a business with a fruit he's never tried or even seen. Pointless. The girl heard her father say he appreciated the offer. Nadia thought maybe she should stop herself, but she still decided that this wouldn't work, and she should definitely intervene in this dialogue between the men. The girl left the room with the listening device made of magic stones and went to her father's room. The box containing the stone looked truly captivating and very unusual. The blue stone resembled Jupiter, as it had rings around it. And as soon as the girl crossed the threshold of her room, she heard her father's voice, who said that this time, perhaps, he would refuse. The visiting Baron didn't expect this either. He was so surprised that he even asked his friend to repeat his words. Baron Hess, meanwhile, was elegantly drinking wonderful and aromatic tea. Pleased with himself, he demonstratively placed the cup on the saucer with the same grace and elegance and began to speak. He repeated that he was declining the offer. He appeared perfectly calm, but inside, his emotions were raging. It was the first time he'd ever refused someone like that. And that's how we got to this point. The girl sat on the couch, a little surprised, and asked her father if he wanted to know how to say no. The man confirmed this. He knew perfectly well that he should refuse, but he couldn't do it. The Baron became sad. All this time, he thought, the family had had too many problems because of this trait of his. The girl listened to her father and was surprised. He was so worried about what happened in the past. Nadia said that she imagined that because he was saying things that were unusual for him, he was starting to get nervous, which is why the words were getting stuck in his throat. It was, of course, strange to teach life to one's own father. But still, the girl was no pushover and had lived quite a long time herself. After thinking for a bit, the girl came up with an idea of what he should do and suggested that they start with something. The man was confused and asked his beloved daughter what she meant. Nadia began, "I need to take a small sip of tea to calm myself down." The girl demonstratively sipped her tea, setting an example. The lady continued, "She told me to get comfortable and think about everything I wanted to say, and then speak with a gentle smile. Say that you appreciate the offer but want to decline." And so we return to the Baron's conversation. Barden wanted to know why he'd been turned down. Hess explained that every business plan he'd invested in had ultimately failed. Hess also said that he was not trying to blame him, but simply realized that Barden simply had no talent for business. Nadia returned to the device. Barden said business was based on luck, and that this time she might get lucky. But Hess made it clear he had given up and was tired of investing in an uncertain future. And then Baron Hess completely finished off his old friend by politely advising him to leave. The Baron's face twisted into a snarl of malice. He was terribly angry and terribly shocked by his old friend's behavior. The girl was completely taken aback by her father's behavior. She was proud of him, believed in him, but she was still shocked. Lady Nadia jumped out of the room and, grabbing the hem of her dress, ran down the stairs. Seeing Vivian there, she called out to her. Nadia said she heard a loud noise. She hoped nothing had happened to her father, but the maid reassured her that the Baron was completely fine. But there was something more important. The two girls approached the crack in the door to the room where both men were and simply stood there in a stupor. Baron Hess sat red-faced and asked what Barden was doing. Meanwhile, he knelt before Hess. The man begged him. He had invested a lot of money in northern fruits, but bandits had stolen it all before they reached the Empire. Baron Barden began to bow. He promised to make a profit and pay Baron Hess 3 times as much. He begged him to help. The girls continued to stand by the crack, watching the proceedings. Barden said the Baron had made a fortune from these magical stones. While the visiting Baron hysterically begged Hess to help him, Hess put his hand on his shoulder. Baron Hess told him to look up. Barden already saw hope in this and said he knew he would help him. But it wasn't to be. Hess said it would be very difficult. He was unlikely to help him. He didn't have that much money. The Baron didn't understand, since he had a ton of money. He asked what Hess meant. What about the money for the magic stones? Hess openly said it wasn't his money. His daughter had found the magic stones, and since many had helped extract them, the money belonged to the Hess estate. Barden was completely enraged. He shouted and said that Hess was the owner of this estate. Why wasn't the money his? But the Baron replied that if he helped him with money, he would only pretend to be a good person. A man doesn't want to rely on his daughter for help forever. Baron Hess wants to become a responsible person. The girl was surprised by her father's words. She was pleased to hear and see him like this. Barden cooled down and realized it was simply pointless. Baron Hess wouldn't help him. Something had gone wrong with him. Barden asked that Hess wasn't as concerned about helping his old friend as he was about what his daughter thought of him. It's a good thing he doesn't understand him at all. And then Barden hit him where it hurt. He said she wasn't even his biological daughter. Hess immediately turned pale. Now the Baron tried to position himself above Hess. He asked, "Isn't Hess ashamed to be a noble aristocrat? He should simply marry her off, so she could repay him for raising him." Barden decided to approach the matter from a different angle. He offered to introduce him to a good option for his daughter, and asked if he would consider it. The man offered an option. Count Iris was old, 70 years old, so he didn't have much time left. Wasn't this the perfect opportunity? Baron Hess was simply seething with rage. He couldn't allow his beloved daughter to be treated like this. The girls seemed to be watching the climax of a movie. They were amazed by what was happening. Baron Hess's hand reached for a heavy and rather large hardcover book. A moment. She's already flying at Baron Barden with all her might. He screams, asking what Baron Hess is doing. Hess started throwing everything he could at him. He ordered him to shut up. How dare he introduce his daughter to this world-famous effeminate old man? The Baron continued to spout insults. Why was the Baron so angry? Because of some fake daughter? This was the point of no return. Hess said he was ashamed to have ever considered him a friend, and the man kicked him out. The girls sensed danger and moved away from the door just in time. A second later, Baron Barden flew out of the room with a kick in the ass. Barden was threatening Hess, but no one cared anymore. Lady Nadia stood in shock, and Vivian was overjoyed. If he hadn't left like that, Nadia would have asked Vivian to throw him out of the estate. But his father not only refused him, he also ordered him to leave. Meanwhile, Hess exhaled and calmed his nerves. He turned around and noticed Nadia. He asked her how long she'd been standing there. Not much. She'd heard a noise, so she'd gone down to check. The girl was about to say something to her beloved father, but he immediately began to make excuses. The man said she was a daughter of the Hess family. They would never force her to do anything she didn't like, so she could rest easy. Just wait a little, and her father would do his part. The girl fell into thought. This was the second time she had heard something like this. A memory from a past life resurfaced in Nadia's mind. Little Heine had asked Lavinia to wait a little while. He would grow up quickly, and she would never have to work another day in her life. The girl was warmed by this memory. Her young husband, even at his age, had already cared for her so much. These words gave Nadia strength. She decided to talk to her father. The girl began. He was probably already accustomed to his duties as master. If Baron Hess is ready, how about taking over the mining business? The man was surprised and asked if he could handle it himself. Nadia confirmed it. She was confident he could handle it well. While her father manages the mining business, Nadia will focus on making money. Come to think of it, the reward the lady received for the key was considerable. Nadia wanted to contact Vivi, but suddenly she disappeared somewhere. But as soon as I thought of Vivi, she immediately appeared. That's what a true friend means. But somehow she appeared behind the door. Vivian was agitated about something. Nadia asked how she got there. Vivi said it wasn't that important and told them to come out right now. And then Vivian said something that left Lady Nadia stunned with surprise. Young Master Baldwin had arrived at the Hess estate. Nadia froze, completely confused as to what he was doing here. He'd asked to be invited, of course, but no one had invited him today. Nadia asked Vivi again, because she didn't understand anything and couldn't believe it. She imagined the wonderful Duke waiting at the entrance to the estate. Lady Hess ran out into the Duke's courtyard, Vivian following her, and everything was just as she'd imagined. The man stood at the entrance, waiting. Seeing him, she was again stunned. So much had happened now, and this was all she needed. Henry stood calmly and looked at the surprised and seemingly even frightened girl. Duke Baldwin decided he would discover Nadja Hess's true identity then and there. He told her that they had met again. The man was led into a very cozy and picturesque room, which evoked comfort, but not in the presence of Henry. Duke Baludin sat down on a luxurious sofa in the middle of the room with a cup of hot and not overly aromatic tea. The girl, despite the awkwardness, decided to break the silence and asked if the Duke liked the tea. Nadia felt that the Duke didn't like strong scents, so she prepared something lighter for him. The man sat stone-faced, seemingly piercing Lady Nadia with his gaze. He completely ignored her words. The girl elegantly folded her hands on top of each other, looking at the Duke. Henry said the young lady apparently knew a lot about him. The girl added that he was the Duke of the North, so any nobleman from that region would know him. Gainey, after listening to the girl, brought her a cup of tea and took a sip. He found this strange. The Duke mentioned the location of the magical stone vein and his allergy to walnuts. These aren't things he's mentioned that many will know, and that's not the only suspicious part. The man also mentioned the imperial bird. When had Nadia seen this work of art? The girl decided to pretend she didn't understand what the Duke was talking about. She also added that she had never seen, but Heinrich interrupted her and told Nadia not to even think about lying. The man was serious. His seriousness was proven by the man's expression and his menacing and commanding tone. When someone hears about the imperial bird, they expect a bird to be depicted. But Nadia knew it was a painting about lovers. I remembered the moment when the girl said that even if she saw it, she wouldn't be able to tell whether it was a fake or the original. Nadia would simply think it was a simple painting about beautiful lovers. Henry said the only people who had seen the painting were his mother and his wife, Labinia. The man immediately turned pale at the mention of his dead wife. The Duke said that whatever excuse she came up with, you'd have to say something he'd accept, especially if it concerned his wife. The man's stern gaze revealed his mood. He missed his wife terribly. He asked Lady Nadia Hess where she got the information that only Labinia knew. The Duke became angry. He asked what kind of relationship he had with Labinia and ordered her to speak. The girl sighed heavily. She understood that she had absolutely nowhere to go. She said that since the Duke had gone so far, she had no choice. The girl agreed to tell him everything. Nadia said the truth was that she had known the Duchess. The man was very surprised. Before Nadia was adopted by the Hess family, she was once nearly kidnapped by a loan shark. Naturally, she lied. The Duchess was nearby and rescued Nadia. After that, she visited her often and told her stories about the world. The imperial bird was one of those stories. Then, suddenly, Labinia stopped coming. And after Nalia had done her research, she unexpectedly learned of the lady's death. And now she finally met the Duke, whom she had previously only heard about. Nadia said that if she had offended him, she apologized. She truly hadn't meant to harm him. Nadia only wanted to help because Lady Labinia loved him very much. The man listened to the rest of the fictitious story. Almost all of it was made up. Only the last sentence was true. He felt embarrassed at the way he'd spoken to Nadia. He gave an awkward laugh and agreed that Labinia did indeed love to tell stories. The young Duke clutched his head and twisted himself. Hope was shattered. Was Labinia dead after all? The man said he understood the whole situation. It was hard for him to accept, but what could he do? The Duke stood and bowed. He finally asked Nadia to stop digging into his wife's past and not try to imitate her again. The man's features hardened again. He said his wife wasn't someone you could just copy. The man said that he would go and left Nadia alone with her unfinished tea. As soon as he left, the girl was able to exhale and show her fear. She was spared. He didn't realize it, but Nadia didn't understand. More than 10 years had passed, so why did he still remember and worry about Labinia? Why does Gainey look so sad and hurt every time he thinks about Nadia's past life? The girl was overwhelmed with emotions, and they were far from positive. She was terribly worried and didn't understand what was happening. Sweat began to pour down Nadia's face from worry. She couldn't quite understand why he was so depressed. Nadia decided to take a chance. She told him after he left that the Duchess hadn't died because of him. The man stopped and was so surprised by these words from Lady Nadia that he even asked her again. Nadia said that it was a terrible accident that no one wanted and no one even expected. So it's time to stop living in the past and focus only on the present and future. No one blames His Highness. The girl remembered the moment when little Heinrich asked Lavinia if she was happy here. Nadia is sure that the Duchess would want Duke Baludin to be happy. Henry was very dismissive of Lady Nadia's advice and said that she knew about it. The man's anger was terrifying. With a sharp, swift movement, he drew his sword from its holster and immediately put it to Lady Nadia's throat. The girl felt afraid and weak before him. Whether she wanted it or not, she still saw him as her Heine, not the Duke, whom she didn't really know. He said that Nadia pretended to be his wife, and now she wants to address him as her? Duke Baldwin rudely stated that no one, absolutely no one, can or has the right to replace Lavinia. Such devotion surprised Nadia even more. She seemed pleased, but on the other hand, the Duke cannot live peacefully after her death. He either doesn't believe Lavinia is dead, or else he terribly blames himself for it. Henry hid the sword and ordered Nadia not to cross that line again and headed for the exit again. But the girl seemed immortal. She continued speaking, and the man stopped. Nadia said that she really hoped that the Duke would not suffer anymore. The man stood for a moment, as if mentally digesting what young Lady Hesse had said. Having finished his thoughts, the man opened the door and set off on his way. He finally understood, as he walked down the moonlit corridor, why he'd seen traces of Lavinia in Nadia. Just imagine, Duke Baludin was fooled by just a simple pretense. What a waste of time. The man walked slowly, holding his sword, hidden in a holster. The Duke stopped at the window and remembered her words when she said that she hoped that the man would not suffer anymore. Heinrich had very mixed feelings about this conversation with Nadia Hesse. But there was something even stranger. A heavy rain began to fall outside. Large raindrops fell loudly onto the surface. He was surprised at how these words calmed him down. The girl was still sitting there, a little upset. Nadia still loved him. Lady Nadia turned to her faithful and best servant, Conrad. The short-haired man bowed before the girl. Nadia let him know that Heinrich had come today. The girl immediately remembered the Duke's expression. Looking at that expression, the girl discovered something she had long ago abandoned. She also remembered the cold blade Henry had held to her neck. The events of that day. Nadia turned to Conrad again and asked him to answer honestly. The accident that killed her wasn't just an accident, was it? The rain continued to pour heavily, adding even more to the already oppressive atmosphere. Conrad looked down at the floor. He apparently didn't really want to answer that question. The servant told his lady that she was far-sighted. The girl reminded him that he had been investigating something at the time and asked him to explain. Yes. There were two types of mud on the wheels of the broken carriage. The unusually wet mud was from the wrong road. It looked like someone had placed it there deliberately. The wheel mounts were also slightly loose. The man added that it was hard to believe it was just an accident. Nadia thought her death was part of someone's plan. If this was intentional, then they weren't aiming at Lavinia, and in place of the Duchess Baldwin, so that they themselves could take the place of Henry's wife. The girl said that if the Duchess was an eyesore for anyone, it was Count Crimson. The Count Crimson family resides southwest of House Baldwin, and for generations they have been loyal vassals of the Baldwin Duchy. The two branches were close enough to marry. If it weren't for Lavinia, Heine would most likely have married Count Crimson's daughter as an adult. It's entirely possible. In fact, there's talk of a remarriage between the two houses. Lady Nadia ordered Conrad to first find out as much as possible about Count Crimson. Nadia said that they must find the culprit of Lavinia's death to ease Heine's guilt. The girl approached the window and mentally addressed Henry. She asked him to wait for him a little while. She couldn't be with him like Lavinia, but she would care for his happiness from afar until the very end. Conrad agreed to the mission. He had nowhere to go at the very least, but he wasn't planning on it. A man is faithful to his mistress. Conrad remained on one knee, paying his respects to his lady. He told her that it would be as she wished. From early morning, the girl sat in the office and dealt with a large number of papers. The girl was distracted by something, and she decided to find out what was going on. Nadia realized that it was a noise from outside, so she went to the window. The lady looked out the window and saw men carrying things. The girl turned to Uncle Pao, asking what he was doing. The man replied that the land's residents had collected some money. They were going to build her a new office. Nadia was very surprised. One of the men shouted that the office would be beautifully decorated and apologized for the noise. They would make it truly magnificent. "Aren't they grateful people?" a female voice said from behind. They said they wanted to give Nadia a small gift, so they gathered early in the morning. It was Mother. The girl became worried and asked if Mother had difficulty walking. The Baroness said it wasn't hard for her to take a short walk. Thanks to the medication Nadia gave her, Mother felt much better. Besides, the mother wanted to talk to her daughter about something. Nadia asked, "What happened?" The mother sat down on a chair opposite her daughter and addressed her. Baroness Hess smiled kindly. Although she was ill, she already looked a little better. Mother asked, "What about Nadia's debut this year?" Vivian stood next to her lady. Nadia didn't understand what they were talking about. Thanks to Nadia, their lands had more money, so the Baroness thought they should hold it first. The debutante ball is held once a year by the imperial family. All the daughters of noble families gather there for the celebration. It usually takes place when a girl turns 19. But Nadia is already 20, a bit late. Nadia isn't particularly interested in social events. Her mother said interest isn't a problem. The Baroness said that she too had a late debut, at 21 years old at the time, because her family was poor. The younger girls looked down on the young Baroness cruelly and condescendingly. They called her a girl without money, without honor, and without youth. Mother was never ashamed of her poverty, but that day, she couldn't tell how terrible and lonely she felt. That is precisely why, more than anything, she does not want her beloved daughter to share the same pain. The girl thought she understood her mother's wishes, but she had no desire to attend the debutante's reception. Now that their income has increased, Nadia has to expand the business, find new veins, build new roads, build houses. Mother put her hand on Nadia's hand and turned to her. The Baroness said that Nadia Hess should put her home affairs aside for a while. These worries at Hess's house aren't hers alone, so Nadia doesn't have to cope with them alone. Mother smiled. She also said that Nadia could trust her father a little more. Although he was timid, he was now beginning to enjoy his work. As his wife, the Baroness saw him becoming more reliable and even gaining courage. The mother praised her daughter, saying she had fulfilled her role well enough. Next comes responsibility for the people of the land. Nadia can't take care of everything herself. The lady listened attentively to the Baroness. Suddenly, Nadia was called out. A man, one of the people carrying the clothes, intervened in their conversation. He said she was the daughter of a baron's family. It would do her good to be a debutante, and 20 is the perfect age for that. When new workers arrive, they will train them well, so Nadia does not have to worry about the mines. Vivian whispered to her lady that this was, in fact, the perfect opportunity. The boss had contacted her, and he announced that Count Crimson's daughter was also participating. The lady paused. Count Crimson's daughter? The young lady rumored to be planning to marry Gainey? Nadia unexpectedly announced that she had agreed and would participate. Everyone was delighted. Lady Hess said that since she would be in the capital for some time, it was imperative to contact her if anything happened. She would arrive immediately. The carriage was already waiting for the young lady. Father asked if both Nadia and Vivi could handle such a long journey. Her father said that if she needed more help, but his daughter interrupted him and said that Vivian had enough. During a conversation with her father, the girl noticed something very interesting. A man who was luxuriously dressed stepped out of the carriage. It turned out to be Conrad undercover, so it was Viscount O'Delly. Vivian chuckled quietly at her boss's hairstyle. Nadia smiled and said that since she would be traveling with Viscount O'Delly, her father shouldn't worry. The Viscount said he would serve the young lady all the way to the capital, and her father asked her to keep an eye on his daughter. Vivian offered her hand to Nadia, urging her to enter the carriage. Nadia noticed some strange glow on the horse and asked Vivi what it was. Vivian tried to find the glow but couldn't. Nadia asked if she really couldn't see the glow around the horses. Vivi said she couldn't see anything. The young lady assumed Conrad had cast some kind of special spell or something. Vivian closed the door. The carriage's wheels began to spin and increase their speed. Suddenly, someone called out to the girl. It turned out that these were people who begged her to bring a handsome groom home. but she understands that it shouldn't be just anyone. Nadia elegantly waved her hand to the people seeing her off and wishing her a good journey. The two carriages, creaking and making the sound of hooves, were still slowly moving forward. Lady Nadia Hesse let out a sigh of relief. She was pleased by the people's genuine love for her. The girl was riding in the same carriage with Viscount O'Delly. They sat opposite each other. Nadia Hesse broke the silence and said Vivian had told her everything. Is Count Crimson's daughter also involved? Then the Count will also be coming to the capital? Conrad said that was true. Excellent. Given Lady Nadia's current status, she can't meet Count Crimson directly, so this is the perfect opportunity to get closer to his daughter. Nadia asked if Conrad had finished researching her biography. He said yes, some time ago. The girl realized that the man was leaving something unsaid, so she asked if there was a but. Conrad reminded her that she had said that she no longer wanted to live as Lavinia. And to do this, the first thing she needs to do is get rid of Duke Baldwin in her life. Nadia is a completely new person to him now, but you're still concerned about his well-being and safety. Meeting Lady Crimson serves the same purpose. Conrad said he was no longer a child for Nadia to care for. The lady smiled slightly and said it was true. He was already 26. The girl thought about Conrad's words. They were true, but that didn't mean she should agree with them. Nadia said it wasn't for Gainey. She was doing it for herself as well. Conrad began to listen attentively, because when she looked at that child, she made a promise to herself. Lavinia was sleeping. Little Henry wiped the tears from her face with a handkerchief. Little Gainey looked at his beloved wife with worry. He watched her. She was sleeping and suffering. Apparently the girl was sick. Has anyone heard the Duke has a wife? A young lady from some unremarkable family of the Earl. She's lucky to have taken Duchess Baldwin's place. If they were looking for someone from the earldom, the Crimson family would have been worth considering. Oh, but the Crimson family's daughter is still a baby. Didn't the Baldwin Duchy simply marry him off because they needed someone to act as a confidant? When the Duke grows up, they'll probably divorce. Oh God, before that happens, will this woman fool him? Sk! If only the last Duke Baldwin had lived a little longer. It's such a shame for the current Duke. He could have had a better bride. The girl had a dream. Her little husband started screaming wife and waking up his beloved Lavinia. The boy, with great anxiety inside, asked the girl if she was okay. The girl could barely make out her husband, the Duke, in the semi-darkness. She sat up and asked where she was. Her husband replied that it was his bedroom. She shouldn't get up yet, so he asked her to lie down a little longer. The doctor said Lavinia had fainted due to exhaustion, so Lavinia needs to get some proper rest. The girl had a terribly tired look. Lavinia asked the Duke not to do that again. The boy was surprised. Why not? Lavinia explained that, even though they were married, they couldn't be close in front of others. They will think that Lavinia controls the duchy through the Duke, and it is understandable that they will start to look down on you. And they will say that Gainey is an incompetent Duke who hid under his wife's skirt. The boy objected, saying that if his wife was feeling unwell, her husband should stay by her side. He believed that was what married couples did. Henry bent down sheepishly and lowered his head in front of his wife. But for the sake of Duke Henry's authority, they must keep their distance. Duchess Lavinia rose from her bed and said that she was returning to her room. The boy wished his beloved wife good night and remained in the room. The boy stood there, very upset. He wanted to help his wife, but it all turned out this way. He said that as Duke Baldwin, he must not show weakness. If he were to one day achieve unshakable authority, would he then be able to address his wife with confidence? The Baldwin estate simply sparkled in the daylight. The colossal building looked magnificent. Two maids stood and gossiped. Things were gradually disappearing from the house because the Duke was secretly selling them. This would explain why the previous Duke's dagger had disappeared. One servant asked, "Why do this?" The second one said, displeased, "Why ask such a thing? He's probably trying to collect money without the Duchess finding out." But the maids have no idea Lavinia is eavesdropping on them. He never shared that he needed money. Just don't tell me that he's hiding, because Lavinia might find out about it. Lavinia emerged from her ambush. The cleaning ladies were immediately frightened and stunned. The girl ordered them to go to the Duke and tell him that Lavinia wanted to talk to him on the terrace over a cup of tea. The girl apologized to the Duke for stealing his time when he should be busy. The boy denied it. He said it was a husband's responsibility to make time for his wife. She suggested that perhaps he'd recently needed a large sum of money. The boy became nervous. Lavinia admitted that she had indeed heard rumors that the Duke was selling items from the house to secretly save up money. She asked him to tell her the truth. If Henry needed money, she could give it to him at any time. The girl reached for a cup of hot tea, which was in a luxurious vessel. The boy was very nervous. He told her that he understood that Lavinia, his wife, worry about him. The boy immediately blushed. He was shy and very shy. The girl said that this was partly true and noticed that her husband blushed and asked if he was okay. Gainey said he was perfectly fine and there was no need to worry. He wasn't sure where or from whom she heard this, though. But rumors that the Duke is secretly collecting money are untrue. They are simply false rumors. Lavinia asked if he had spread them on purpose. The boy said yes, because since he was small, no one suspected me. The girl asked, "Then why did he do it?" The little Duke lowered his head. Henry reminded his wife that she had said that if they were close, others would not value him at all. So he wondered who these others might be. Servants or people in the imperial palace. If people outside the estate can judge my power based on internal affairs, then someone is taking information from here. So he fed each of the suspicious maids false rumors. That way, when a rumor spread, he could figure out where it started. All this was done simply to determine which people in the duchy could be trusted and which not. So he did this on purpose? Lavinia thought so. So the Duke intends to get rid of the unwanted servants, said the Duchess. But why is the Duke going to such lengths? He said it was for his wife. Because the little Duke wants to be a husband who stands confidently. He said he would stop anyone who ignored or treated Lavinia badly. Even if it's just a little, the boy still wants to protect Lavinia from these looks. The Duchess thanked him and said it was thoughtful of him to think of such a plan. He was pleased, but Lavinia said there were some shortcomings, however. The boy asked what the shortcomings were. Not all suspicious maids will fall for the Duke's tricks, so it's hard to call this a perfect plan. And those who notice the trick will start lying, making it harder to identify the threat. The girl smiled. She was touched that her husband was upset by her comment. Of course, we need to deal with those who are disloyal. After all, he did what was considered beneficial for Baludin. Lavinia turned to him. She said he had done well, so she would reward him. The boy asked again. She said yes, and asked if he wanted anything. From her, for example. The boy simply and succinctly stated that he wanted to dance with his wife. Henry stood up, put his hand on his heart, and raising his voice, asked his wife to teach him to dance. The girl was very surprised by such a request, and asked why exactly she wanted to teach him to dance. He said that he was still young, so he couldn't be with her during her debut. But be that as it may, the boy wants her first dance to be with him. He extended his hand to her and asked if it was possible. His hand was softer and smaller than his wife's. The girl extended her hand in response, immediately answering his question. This boy seemed more like a younger brother than a husband. However, he was the first person who addressed Lavinia so sincerely. It was then, for the first time, that she thought she wanted to be on good terms with someone. In the future, even if their paths diverge, Lavinia hopes they will remain friends. It's only natural that she can't ignore this little one. After all, he's her true and beloved Gainey. She promised herself that she would make Henry happy. She can't break that promise. She asked if Conrad would definitely help her. The man nodded. The girl looked out the window. She realized that it was all about to begin. She must find out the cause of death at any cost, and free Henry from the guilt that has tormented him for so long. Lady Nadia's carriage entered the capital. A girl watched from a balcony. She thought about how vibrant and big the capital was. Apparently, this lady was also a visitor. Horse races were held in the capital. Dozens of horses were completely exhausted. Ari was asked for his opinion. As expected, the winner this time was... The girl guessed that the Golden Rose would win and asked her companion. The man in the hat predicted that a completely different horse would win. And then the girl suggested making a bet on who was right about the winner of the race. Vivian asked Conrad if this girl was Lady Uria Crimson. He said yes. She looked exactly as she did in the portrait. Conrad, Vivian, and Nadia watched Lady Crimson and her companion, who were apparently arguing. Nadia thought that on the outside, she looked like an ordinary, energetic young lady, but she loves luxury and gambling. And recently, there was even a rumor about a young groom. Nadia asked if Lady Crimson was like that. Conrad said the truth wasn't yet clear, but she didn't have the best reputation. There are these rumors swirling around when there's talk of marrying the Baldwin family. It's not good news. Where does she usually hang out? If she really is that problematic, Nadia wants to see her in person and confirm it. Perhaps, since she enjoys excitement, upon arrival in the capital, she will most likely go to the races. Lady Crimson's companion told her it was dangerous near the railing, and Lady Nadia became curious about him. Who was this man? Nadia Hess had heard that Lady Crimson had many friends of the opposite sex. Could this be her lover? Suddenly, a girl approached Nadia. She asked if Lady Hess had chosen which horse she would bet on. Nadia Hess wanted to refuse, but Conrad said that since they were already here, why not bet on some horse? The young lady thought that even if she tried, she still wouldn't know which horse was good. If she was going to bet, she should pick a winner. That would make it easier to get to know Lady Crimson. Suddenly, Lady Nadia noticed a glow on the horse again. She found it strange and was surprised. She couldn't understand what it was and where this glow, was coming from. The light seemed to be in the horse's chest area. It was very bright and resembled a small ball of lightning. Without thinking twice, the girl decided to bet on the horse that was glowing. The girl asked Nadia if she was talking about the Great Raven. Apparently, this horse was weak. Yuri asked Nadia if she was sure she didn't want to choose another horse. This horse had little racing experience and was still small, so her chances of winning were quite slim. Right! Wouldn't it be better to choose that shiny gray horse then? Someone's voice was heard. Nadia was surprised. Apparently, she wasn't the only one who saw this glow and wasn't the only one who had gone crazy. Nadia Guess said no, she's betting on the right one. If what she saw wasn't a mistake, this means that the Great Raven must win today. The race began. The horses moved from the start in a second, racing forward. Immediately after the gate, 2 horses quickly took the lead. Steel Scales follow. Golden Rose is in the lead. Yuri immediately rejoiced, shouting, "Go, Rose!" They'll be entering the first turn soon. Lady Nadia was quite tense. The Great Raven has been left behind from the very start. Perhaps he's saving his strength for the end, when all the others are exhausted. Vivian asked if Lady Nadia was okay. It was her first time at the races, wasn't it? It wouldn't be a big deal if she backed a losing horse. Lady Crimson boasted to her companion that she was right, still encouraging her idle horse from the stands. Lady Nadia thought about it. Everything here seemed very strange. This light was the most peculiar thing about this place. Only she could see it. Or was it not only her? The ball of magical power began to sparkle even more, as if it had increased in size. Everyone was surprised, and the stands began to cheer. The Great Raven is breaking through. Wow! What an unexpected turn of events. Everyone was simply stunned by these events. Great Raven moves to the inside track, and in the blink of an eye, he's leapt straight into 4th place. Vivian was amazed. What a horse! This is the one my lady had chosen earlier. She accelerated so unexpectedly. Nadia was definitely right about the other world. The Steel Scales maintain their position, but its speed is gradually decreasing. With his final spurt, the Great Raven took 2nd place. The lead still belongs to Golden Rose. Both horses are running at the limit of their abilities. While Golden Rose remains in the lead, Great Raven continues to apply pressure. It's the final stretch. Nadia shouts that he can do it. Just try a little harder. The Great Raven picks up speed and aligns with the Golden Rose. Yuria screamed at Golden Rose to run just as fast. She could win, please. Let her win. The Golden Rose is accelerating. They're practically neck and neck. Emotions are running high. Adrenaline, panic, joy. This is a brutal battle. 100 meters to go. 80, 60. They've crossed the finish line. The horse that shocked absolutely everyone and achieved this long-awaited, difficult victory is... The horsewoman was already celebrating her victory. The winner was the Great Raven. Vivian was still in shock. The horse my lady had chosen had won. How big was her winnings? Now it was time for a reaction. Lady Nadia wasn't particularly surprised by the victory. She'd seen the light. She'd known it would happen. Lady Crimson decided to approach Lady Hess and her friends and began calling her. Lady Yuria tried to catch her breath and asked if Lady Nadia could spare her a little time. Nadia Hess already realized that the plan was working perfectly. Her target was running right into her arms. The young lady smiled sweetly and asked what Yuria was interested in. Crimson asked how she knew the great raven would win. Yuria said she assumed Lady Nadia. Hess interrupted her and asked, "A mage, right?" and apologized. Why is she asking this suddenly? And yes, Nadia isn't a mage. Yuri already asked her companion, whose name is Ari, and he said that horse has mana. So maybe Lady Nadia too? Someone called out to her. Her companion came up to her and asked what she was thinking when she ran away alone. He was afraid that he would lose her. Ari always says to be careful when she's outside the estate. Yuria said she was already planning to go back. The companion said Yuri was a liar. If he hadn't gone looking for her, she would have disappeared again. Then the man noticed Lady Nadia and her company. He said not to pay attention to what Yuria said. Oh gods, he didn't introduce himself. Where are his manners? The man smiled and elegantly removed his hat and apologized for not introducing himself right away. He turned out to be Archis Blanche of the Ducal House of Blanche. The man looked very neat and elegant. Archis said he was very pleased to meet her. Lady Yuria followed his example and introduced herself in the same manner. The girl realized the man next to her was from Blanche's family. Archish suggested that Yuria return. Yuria objected. She still had much to discuss with the lady. Then Duke Blanche suggested inviting Lady Nadia to the Crimson Estate. Yuria's mood instantly changed to a good one. This was a great idea. She wanted to show Nadia the horses she rode herself. She asked if Hess wanted to visit the estate tomorrow. Lady Nadia smiled. The plan was going not just well, but wonderfully. Nadia Hess smiled brightly and charmingly, revealing all her grace and tenderness. She didn't mind. As she watched the couple of friends leave, she thought that the plan had gone into action sooner than she had expected. Lady Nadia asked if, since their business here was concluded, they could go. Vivian said yes. A man addressed Conrad by name. He was dressed entirely in black. The man whispered to Conrad that a report had just come in from his subordinates, tracking the bounty targets. Their conversation was no longer understandable. The men spoke very quietly. But suddenly, Conrad became very dissatisfied with something. Apparently not even with something, but rather with someone. We returned to Duke Baldwin. The man was looking at the newspaper, which bore Conrad's image. Duke Baldwin smoothed the rustling newsprint with his fingers and looked at Conrad's face. The glasses looked great on the Duke, of course. They seemed to add even more stateliness to his appearance. The man continued to sit and look at the piece of paper. He laughed nervously at what was written in this newspaper. The Duke heard a knock. He was also examining the paper. Heine allowed entry. Allison brought the newly prepared headache medicine he had requested. The butler was told it worked better than the previous one. Heinrich took off his glasses. Allison remained in the office. The man asked what was going on. What was he standing there for? The butler said Count Fseelan had arrived for a visit. Perhaps they shouldn't receive him today? Henry froze slightly. Count Fseelan is Labinia's father, a part of her. Duke Baldwin said that the time would come for him, that he should be received today. Gainey bowed his head and ordered Ellison to allow the Count to enter. A fragrant tea stood on a saucer. The Count asked how the Duke was doing. He assumed Henry was very busy since he hadn't shown up anywhere. The Count was passing by and decided to pop in. Heine was apparently in a very bad mood, looking even sterner than usual. He responded curtly, "I see," to the Count's story. The guest quickly understood the host's mood and decided not to burden him with too much information. He smiled again and told the Duke that it upset him a little. The Count said the Boludin family had apparently recently hosted a garden party. How could they have forgotten the Fseelans? The man immediately said everything was fine. Labinia was no longer with us, so the Count assumed Heinrich must be uncomfortable seeing them. Duke Boludin showed no emotion at all on his face. Of course, the Count was interested. He'd heard that the garden his daughter had grown had recently been renovated. The guest smiled slyly. Speaking of which, he discussed it with his wife, and they think they should also grow a small garden on their estate. The Duke asked what the purpose of this was. Well, didn't his daughter love gardens? He even planned to plant roses, which Labinia loved, but it turned out that a garden needs more than just flowers. We also need a few trees for balance and walking paths. And imagine how beautiful it would be with a fountain along the alley. And if the Count wants to drink tea while thinking of Labinia, he'll also need a table. And of course, the garden should be looked after by no one other than the gardener. But they only had enough funds to prepare the land. The Duke immediately understood what was happening. This upset him. The Duke told the Count that this turn of events was entirely expected. Henry turned to Count Vsilin and said that he understood that he needed money. But still, he refused to landscape the garden when Labinia was alive because it was too expensive. And now you're using that as an excuse? Isn't that absurd? The Count tried to justify himself. Back then, he said, their situation had been difficult. He couldn't care for his daughter as he should have. How could he have known Labinia would leave so suddenly? He turned to acting and became a suffering father. Poor daughter, she married a young groom and sacrificed herself for her family for 8 whole years. What a cruel fate. And even after death, her own husband neglects her. Henry was angry, but he decided to make a quick and easy excuse. He turned to Allison. He asked that his money be prepared for the Count's garden. The man understood the request. Count of Vsilin immediately beamed and sparkled. He thanked the Duke. He said that his daughter would definitely be happy in heaven. And he was about to leave. The Duke stopped him. He said there was one more thing the Count needed to know. The Count became a little nervous and turned to Duke Baldwin. He let his deceased wife's father know that Labinia's favorite flower was not the rose, but Gypsophila. Count Vsilin tried not to show his fear and worry, but it was difficult. It was all written all over his face. Henry looked out the window, watching Count Vsilin. Allison came up behind him and addressed his master. He said that as long as the Duke continued to follow his lead, the Count's greed would never cease. He would continue to demand money for trumped-up reasons. Henry said he knew it, but he had no choice. No matter how vile and disgusting he was his late wife's father, and if it weren't for him, the Duke would never have met Labinia. That's all Heine can do for her now. By the way, what about that case the Duke assigned Ellison to investigate? The Duke's fears proved entirely correct. Conrad took action again. He even used a fake identity card of Viscount Conrad O'Delly. The man looked at the papers the butler had given him and asked if there was anything else unusual. It seems he recently traveled to the capital, along with Nadia Hess. This greatly surprised Heinrich. He told this girl not to interfere in such matters anymore. She didn't listen to him, and regarding the specific task you assigned him. Apparently, the message reached his ears successfully. They should have a response soon. Heinrich praised Ellison for his work and told him he could go. Allison seemed to be leaving, but he stopped and began to speak. The Duke should reduce the dosage of his headache medicine. Duke Baludin found himself in a slightly awkward position in front of his butler. He said he would keep it in mind. At night, the Baldwin estate reveals itself in all its glory. It looks mesmerizing. It makes your blood run cold. The Duke's hand again reached out to the image of Conrad on paper. Henry sat down in his wonderful chair and laughed. He was obviously very tired. He began to think about what he had learned from Ellison today, or more precisely, he began to think about the situation with Conrad. Conrad was his late wife's only right-hand man. She trusted him 101%. He alone served Labinia so much that even the Duke himself had difficulty ever seeing his face. But after the accident, Conrad disappeared completely. Why did he appear now? And Nadia Hess? Why is she with him? What's going on? What connects all of this? In an instant, a dark, gigantic figure, apparently that of a strong man, appeared in front of the Duke. Duke Baldwin asked the shadow man who he was and how he got here. The man's hand reached for his hood and began to pull it down. Short gray hair appeared. It was Conrad. He said it was the Duke himself who was desperately looking for him, wasn't he? Henry was horrified. This is such a masterpiece that words simply cannot describe how unique this man is. The man recognized him immediately and told him that he was Conrad. It was amazing. Conrad stood by the open window, his clothes and hair fluttering in the strong wind. Without hesitation, Conrad asked what Duke Baldwin was planning. Why was he looking for him? Why does he interfere in his affairs and force him to look for the Duke? The thing is, Henry slowly began to rise from his chair, that after the death of the Duke's wife, Conrad disappeared. Then Henry did not attach any importance to this. Heine understood that the vagabond would wander forever, or return to his owner. But now Conrad showed up out of the blue. It seems Labinia's right-hand man was collecting money by completing bounty missions. Did Conrad suddenly need a large sum? If not, then Heinrich grabbed Conrad by the collar and pulled him toward him. Does this have anything to do with Labinia's death? Conrad looked at him blankly. It was clear he wouldn't tell him anything. Conrad broke free from Henry's grip and walked away. He said his mistress was Lady Lavinia. He was under no obligation to answer the Duke. Heine was surprised, but a moment later he became angry. Again, no information could be obtained. Conrad thought about his mistress, the current Nadja Hess. Immediately after the accident, the Duke began searching for any clue to Labinia's death. But he couldn't find a single trace of the perpetrator. There wasn't even a glimmer of hope. Every time he was overwhelmed by the helplessness of this endless chase, he even began to think that maybe this really was just an unfortunate accident. But then strange things began to happen. Henry looked at Conrad. A girl has appeared who knows about century-old records and information that only the Baldwin family possesses. And now, even the bandit who disappeared shortly after her death has suddenly reappeared. And this unites absolutely all the factors that Henry listed earlier. Nadja Hess. She's the enigma of the century. Who is she really? How is she connected to everything? Henry started yelling at Conrad, asking him to tell him what their intentions were. What did he know? Conrad looked at the Duke silently. There was no hope he wouldn't betray his mistress. Conrad said his answer hadn't changed. He had nothing more to say. The Duke's paranoid delusions had nothing to do with Conrad, but he would give him one piece of advice. There's nothing he can do. Let him give in. And forget about the past. It's the only way to honor his mistress. He's asking him to forget Lavinia? Ha! Conrad said it so casually. Conrad had already disappeared. Heinrich was standing by the window. For Duke Baldwin, forgetting his beloved wife is impossible. Allison was in the hallway. He noticed his master and was surprised, because it was already late. He asked the Duke where he was going at such a late hour. The Duke asked the butler where Nadja Hess was right now. Ellison said he'd heard Lady Hess had gone to the capital to prepare for her debut. What's wrong? The butler asked. Henry asked for immediate transport to the capital. The Duke expected Conrad to react this way. There was only one thing left he could rely on, and it was she. He absolutely had to meet Nadja Hess. The young Baroness's carriage moved through the wonderful capital. Vivian said the walk around the capital was absolutely incredible. The tea was so delicious, and all the clothes were so beautiful. Thanks to Vivi, Nadja found a wonderful dessert shop. Vivi said she should enjoy the capital for as long as she could, so she wouldn't have any regrets. The girl thought it would have been nicer if Conrad had gone with them. Where had he gone, leaving only a note? Do they really have to go through such trouble? Vivi asked. It would be easier if she could sneak into the Crimson's house. Nadja said that Count Crimson is under serious suspicion, but they have no hard evidence. They need physical evidence, so we need to keep a closer eye on them. And they are the lucky ones. Nadja Hess looked out the carriage window, surveying the capital's surroundings. They might get some unexpected information. Hess's carriage arrived at the Crimson estate. Vivian helped Lady Nadja out of their luxurious carriage. Vivi said Lady Crimson looked quite ordinary when they saw her at the races. Didn't she? Nadja agreed. The girl strode confidently toward the estate. If Count Crimson is innocent, then the wedding of Gainey and Lady Crimson was practically a thing, right? It was painful for Nadja to realize such details. Whether she wanted to admit it or not, she still subconsciously considered Gainey her little fiancé. Exactly. Then there will be someone else next to Gainey instead of Nadja. For this child, she is nothing more. Suddenly, the young Duke Blanche appeared on the horizon. He looked wonderful. He noticed her and greeted her. The girl was slightly taken aback. The girl looked scared. She didn't understand what was happening around her. She looked around and realized that there was absolutely no one around. Vivian pointed out that there was, downstairs. She didn't understand and asked again, "Downstairs?" The young Duke lay flat on the ground and greeted the girl. Lady Nadja Hess was worried about him and asked if everything was all right. She decided to help him and offered him her hand. Young Duke Blanche laughed and said that it was all right, because he was always falling. Archis Blanche, the young Duke of the Blanche family, also Uriah Crimson's cousin. Before the girl found out about their relationship, she made a very rude assumption. The guy said Uriah hadn't gotten ready yet, so he hurried to greet them in her place. "Welcome!" The Duke said he was very glad that Lady Hess accepted their invitation. Nadja smiled. "You have a leaf on your head." Nadia said. The girl said it was thanks to them for the invitation. He was a simpler person than Nadia thought. Nadia Hess asked if the young duke enjoyed horse racing as much as Yuri, who was so passionate about it. He said he wasn't particularly interested. He'd only come because he was following Yuri. So how did he determine the winning horse? The guy became embarrassed. He explained that in the Great Raven, he saw the glow of mana. Mana! Nadia asked again, not realizing what that was. Mana is the source of all power. If one awakens their mana, they can increase their strength and exceed natural limits. He chose the Great Raven because he had thought about it. Mana is a natural force possessed by all living beings. It's not unique to the Great Raven, but it's present in him and Lady Hess as well. It always exists and flows alongside the life force. However, the man waved his hand so elegantly that any socialite would have been envious. Only a few with the talent can awaken or sense mana. It's a shame. If Nadia had seen it too, they could have discussed so much. But Hess said she'd seen something similar. She said the Great Raven's heart shone like a precious stone. The Duke was surprised. However, Nadia isn't sure if it was mana. Not that there's any way to tell. The boy was happy for his new friend and said that it was indeed mana. He turned to her and asked if she'd ever considered studying magic. Vivian, like a little child, beamed with joy for her mistress. The man crossed his arms, hoping that Lady Nadia was going to study magic. Lady Hess was very surprised and asked again, "What magic?" She felt she had nothing in common with that. She said that she didn't even know where they were studying it. But Ari said that Nadia shouldn't worry, because he himself could teach her. He may look like that, but he's a master of magic. There's probably no one in the Empire who knows it better than me. Perhaps? Nadia thought it sounded fun and convenient, but still. She said that she appreciated his offer, but unfortunately, it still seemed difficult for the young Baroness. She needs to prepare for the upcoming debutante ball and visit many places that interest her. Still, if Lady Hess ever became interested, Aris asked that she be sure to let him know. At this point, Lady Yuria jumped out and called Lady Hess, asking how long she had been waiting. The girl looked simply stunning. She apologized. The carriage ride turned out to be longer than I expected. Aris screamed at his cousin. He told her to be careful, but she caused a stir with a simple jog. It would be an understatement to say she ran just a little. Lady Hess must have been scared. Ari's just being overprotective of Yuria. But Nadia said everything was fine. The guy looked at the girls, a little embarrassed and upset. He coughed awkwardly into his fist and decided it was time to go. He said he needed to bring something, so he asked for it to be changed. Yuria would help them explore the estate. For some reason, Nadia felt a sense of déjà vu. Then see you later. The girls waved to the guy as he left. Lady Yuria began to think about what they could do to have some fun. She asked if Nadia wanted to see her horses. Actually, not long ago, Yuria brought the Great Raven to them. Lady Nadia was very surprised by this. The horse ran and stamped its hooves on the ground with an absolute sense of freedom. Judging by the way the Great Raven is frolicking, he's really enjoying himself here. Nadia assumed so. Really? She asked Yuri. She really hoped so. The comfort of her horses was important to her. Lady Nadia watched the horses running across the field. She asked Lady Crimson if she was very interested in horse racing. And yes, she was. She finds watching exciting horse races up close fascinating. But Lady Crimson likes just looking at it. When she sees the horses running freely, she feels as if she herself is becoming freer. This young Lady Crimson envies them a little for their unlimited freedom. That's how it was. Lady Nadia was very captivated by her companion's story and listened attentively. And one more thing, it turns out that horses are very empathetic. It's so fascinating. When Yuria is feeling sad, she seems to understand and hugs her with her head. The girl decided to get down to business. From what she'd heard, talk of marriage to Count Baldwin was continuing. If they get married, Yuria will be far away from her horses, so it seems she will be very upset. Judging by the expression on Yuria's face, she had already lived through this moment and felt sad. Suddenly, the girl began to understand what Lady Nadia had told her about her marriage to Duke Baldwin. Lady Yuria felt very uneasy. It seemed like such a sensitive topic. Yuria clasped her hands and said that apparently Lady Nadia had also heard this story. Nadia justified herself by saying that if you are from the north, you will definitely hear about it. The girl realized that this was indeed entirely possible. Uriah looked very unhappy. Lady Crimson admitted that she does not really want to marry Duke Baldwin. Uriah said that her words may sound childish, but she at least wants a marriage where two people respect each other. But such a thing with Duke Baldwin is simply impossible. Nadia asked why Lady Uriah thought so. Lady Hess was confident the Duke would respect his wife, but Lady Crimson said that wouldn't be the case. Yuri says that the Duke still cannot forget his ex-wife. Nadia was very surprised that even Yuri knew about this. She asked what the young countess was talking about. Lady Crimson recently visited Duke Baldwin's residence. Before Uriah first stepped foot inside, she was filled with anticipation and excitement. But then, as she passed by, she saw something that instantly turned her heart cold. The girl stumbled into the previous Duchess's room. The items inside were clean, without a hint of dust, but there were traces of their use. Even the servants cleaned the room as if the lady was still alive and prepared fresh water. This place was not the room of a dead man, not at all. Isn't it obvious who gave such an order? It's been 10 years since the previous Duchess died. Usually, if things are preserved, they remain as untouched furnishings. In the Duke's heart, this room still belongs only to the former Duchess. Love seems so complicated, as if the Duke had gone mad without Lavinia. Why? Just why? Why does the Duke go so far? Is it possible that Lavinia's death has been looming over this child all this time? For all these 10 long years? Yuri's father says it's good that the Duke doesn't have concubines, but honestly, isn't that strange? Suddenly, Lady Crimson became worried about Lady Hess because she noticed that she had turned pale and asked if everything was okay with her. Nadia said everything was fine. Perhaps she was a little chilled by the cool breeze. Uriah apologized for keeping Nadia there. Uriah invited Nadia inside and said she would treat her to a delicious meal. Lady Hess thanked her. Lady Nadia was still upset. She felt guilty for the young Duke Baldwin's condition. The girl didn't understand what Gainey was thinking about. His feelings for 10 years. Uriah said she was thrilled to have the opportunity to attend the debutante ball with Lady Hess. She'd been worried she wouldn't know anyone at the ball, but now she felt at peace. However, she was worried about how well she'd handle it. She was afraid she'd make too many mistakes. Nadia reassured her and told her not to worry, as Nadia had confidence in her. Exactly! There's a great coffee shop in town. Uriah suggested Lady Hess go there with her sometime. Nadia agreed, adding that she'd also found a great dessert shop. From Lady Crimson's reaction and facial expression, it was easy to tell how much she loved sweets. A rough male voice called out to Uriah. The girl was dumbfounded. In the center of the corridor stood a tall, stately man with a stick. Uriah was horrified. It was her father, the stern Count Crimson. Nadia glanced at Uriah and immediately read everything on her face. Nadia quickly determined that this man was Uriah's father. She immediately realized that this was her suspect and sharpened her gaze in his direction. The man looked elegant and masculine, but at the same time his aura was too unpleasant. Count Crimson said that Uriah went to the pasture again. The man was ready to tell his daughter everything, but he had just started speaking when he was interrupted. Nadia interrupted him. She apologized for the late introduction and bowed, introducing herself. The man turned his attention away from his daughter and towards the guest on his estate. Nadia guessed the Count had probably never heard of them. It was a small village with fewer than 100 residents. The man looked at his daughter. The young lady was simply trembling with fear, especially from the stern and strict gaze of her father. Count Crimson demonstratively tapped his cane and attracted his daughter's attention. He began to scold her. The man had repeatedly told his daughter to only associate with people of her own level. This, in Nadia's presence, was very rude and unethical. Uriah said that her father couldn't speak like that. But how dare she address her father like that? The man slammed his cane down on the tile with all his might and shouted a command for his daughter to remain silent at the top of her lungs. And as if nothing had happened, the man turned around. He told his daughter not to waste her time on useless people. The man turned around slightly, and his angry grin appeared on his face. Count Crimson said when his daughter would finally understand her role in this life. In a rude tone, the father ordered Lady Uriah to follow him directly. The girl glanced fearfully at her recently humiliated companion. Lady Crimson bit her lip with mixed feelings and fear of her father. She did not want to leave, but the girl had absolutely nowhere to go. Without thinking twice, Lady Yuria ran straight after her father. Lady Nadia told Vivian everything about the Count and his daughter, and the maid flew into a terrible rage. She couldn't understand what was wrong with this man. He's a count himself. What right does he have to talk about class? Calling him just a count isn't enough. Once he marries into the Baldwin family, he'll be on par with a marquise. It still really pissed Vivian off. And Lady Crimson was something else. She behaved so sweetly with Lady Hess, and then dared to simply follow that vile count without a word. Nadia stood up for her friend and said that she was sure that Lady Crimson did not want this. It is possible that Lady Crimson is waging her own lonely battle against her tyrant father. Lady Nadia felt genuinely sorry for Lady Crimson. She partially understood her feelings and situation. Freeing yourself from your family is never easy. Nadia said they were done here anyway and suggested they return to the estate, to which Vivi complied. They'd have to find another way to get to the Count. The two girls were already heading to their estate when a familiar voice called out to them from behind. It was the young Duke Blanc. The boy looked very confused, as if something had happened. But it turned out Yuria had told him what had happened. The boy apologized, as the girl had been invited as a guest. But Lady Hess said everything was perfectly fine. Nadia asked Arkisa to tell Lady Crimson that she need not worry at all. The girl was not offended by her. The young Duke was truly very embarrassed. It was easily visible on his face, where a bead of sweat was running down. But now his expression turned to one of embarrassment and awkwardness. The guy turned to Nadia and said, "If it wouldn't be too much trouble?" From the inside pocket of his jacket, Arhis took out a letter with a beautiful golden wax seal. He handed the envelope to Lady Hess and asked her to accept the letter. The girl took the envelope and began to examine it. After looking at it for a moment, she asked, "Is this an invitation?" The man rubbed his neck and said, "Yes, it was an invitation. They were having a social party soon." He said that he would be very glad if Lady Hess would also attend this party. The girl was very surprised by such a gesture. Moreover, Aris was very embarrassed. She began to think. Blanche's ducal house and the Count's family are cousins, so they meet often. Getting closer to the young Duke seemed like a good opportunity, and so she agreed. The guy was apparently very happy about this, and even asked again if it was true. He was very afraid that Lady Hess would refuse, but now young Duke Blanche is completely calm. He said he looked forward to meeting her. The Duke took the lady's hand and placed a light kiss on the back of her hand. Still holding Lady Nadia's delicate hand, he said they would see each other at the party and wished her a good day. The girl had already walked away from the estate, turned around, and saw the young Duke waving goodbye. The girl noticed this, and without hesitation, waved back to Duke Blanche. Lady Hess was thinking about how quickly she'd found a solution to her problem. She was incredibly grateful to the young Duke. Suddenly, Vivi started calling her name. Without a hint of embarrassment, the maid said that she thought the young Duke Blanche had his eye on Nadia Hess. Nadia was surprised by her maid's assumption. Vivi explained. When he spoke to her, the Duke seemed a little nervous. Nadia thought it was because they both had Mana. By the way, Lady Hess needed a new dress for the party. She asked Vivian if she could have her take care of it. Vivian happily agreed and said to leave it to her, since the boss would pay the bills anyway. The girls had already arrived at the estate. Lady Hess was drinking tea. Vivian addressed her. She asked if she knew from the very beginning that the young Duke was a magician. Lady Nadia said yes. He seemed close to Lady Crimson, so she decided to look up some basic information about him. Vivian was lost in thought. The girl stood by the window, a gentle breeze curling her pink hair. A typical mage would try to build a reputation. Besides, Vivi had never heard rumors about him. That's true, but he didn't seem like the type to worry much about his reputation. If people found out he was a mage, it could only lead to problems. The girl set the almost full mug of tea aside on an elegant saucer. Lady Nadia Hess asked if her faithful friend and servant Conrad had arrived. Literally, a moment later, the door opened and Conrad entered. Asking if Nadia had called him, Lady Hess was surprised and asked when he had arrived. He replied that he had arrived only recently, and if the lady needed anything, she should give him the order. But Nadia said that she had not called him at all to give orders. Nadia decided to ask where Conrad had been all this time. The man became nervous. Conrad didn't know what to say. He lowered his head and stared silently at the floor, while Nadia waited for an answer. The girl looked at her servant with suspicion. She clearly suspected something. Lady Hess took up her mug of tea again and told him that it didn't matter anyway. If it's his personal business, he shouldn't have to report to Nadia. He's entitled to his own time. He decided not to hide or deceive his mistress and objected, saying that this was not so. In fact, he said that he went out to meet and talk to someone, and that someone was Duke Baldwin. The girl was stunned by this information. He admitted he felt he'd revealed something to Duke Baldwin. Nadia Hess looked at him in complete bewilderment. So Conrad not only prevented them from finding the key, but also deliberately allowed him to find it himself. Conrad said that was true. Nadia said that there was no need to react to such a provocation. The girl asked if Conrad had a reason to find Gainey. Nadia asked him to tell the truth. Conrad was silent. Words were very difficult for him to speak at that moment. But still, the man said that what mattered most to him was the happiness of his mistress, the happiness of Lady Hess. Nadia said she didn't want to go back to her past life, but she also said she couldn't help but pay attention to Duke Baldwin. The moment in the carriage came to mind. Nadia said she couldn't leave Duke Baldwin. She needed to find those who killed her, so that Gain would stop feeling guilty. Therefore, for Lady Nadia to be free, the Duke must let go of the past and start living in the present. He still clings, unable to accept it. But Lavinia's death cannot be undone. Conrad's impatience to give Lady Hess the future she dreamed of led him to act carelessly. The man apologized. The girl listened attentively to her servant. She was partly pleased by such concern. Lady Nadia Hess ordered the man to immediately raise his head and look at her. After a moment's thought, the girl said that, one way or another, Conrad was right. Perhaps Lady Nadia needed someone to remind her of reality. Nadia knows she's conflicted right now. She says she doesn't want to be Lavinia again, but she's worried about Heine's happiness. Anyone would think that's odd. Besides, the girl remembered the moment with her stepsister. Her sister said that, as expected, Lavinia was very strange. She also remembered her new family. They said Lavinia really scared them. The girl became nervous. She thought that, yes, perhaps she was rebooting herself. She can't be the one to make Gainey happy. But if that accident still haunts him, she wants to at least take responsibility for it. That's exactly why this will be the very last time. Let's make this truly the last time. Even if her longing for the happy times spent with Heinrich, and the desire to see that wonderful childish smile again, Nadia Hess thought long and hard about everything connected with Heinrich. It was truly difficult for her. But in the end, a smile flashed across the young Lady Hess's face. Lady Nadia Hess eventually said that once the truth about the accident was revealed, she would let Conrad go. But Nadia still needs his help. Can she rely on Conrad's strength a little longer? Conrad moved towards her and told her not to worry or anything. He said that if it concerned the happiness of his mistress, Nadia Hess, he would help with anything. The girl smiled instantly. She was incredibly grateful to Conrad. The girl glanced out the window. The sun was shining brightly outside, warming the earth. The girl was again overcome with memories of her past life as a duchess. She remembered little Gainey, who brought her a whole bouquet of beautiful, fresh sunflowers. He told her he would take responsibility and make her happy. Vivian found the girl. She looked worriedly at her mistress and tore her away from her thoughts. She asked Nadia Hess how she was feeling and if she was okay, because Vivi was worried. For just a split second, Nadia Hess felt like Lady Lavinia again. Lady Hess quickly recovered and told Vivian that she was perfectly fine. The girl beamed and added that she was only now on the right path. So everything was fine. The sun was already setting. The large and magnificent estate obscured the mountains, leaving only their peaks visible. The upset young Lady Crimson sat at the table with food, although not a single bite of food went down her throat. The young countess's eyes looked incredibly unhappy. Even the color of her pupils became a little darker. Lady Uriah thought about Lady Hess. She felt ashamed in front of her companion. Her father terribly disgraced her in front of Nadia, and also humiliated the young lady herself. Lady Crimson thought that Lady Hess was incredibly upset and disappointed in Yuri because of what happened. Lady Hess even bought her some nice desserts, but Uriah showed her unpleasant side. The girl's eyes were already filled with tears. A lump had formed in her throat, and she was about to cry. But Ari said that the lady was also invited to the next party, so she would use this chance to apologize properly. Then the girl began to be tormented by obsessive thoughts. What if Lady Hess didn't forgive her? There was a knock at the door. It turned out to be the butler. He informed Lady Crimson that Duke Baldwin had arrived at the estate. The girl was very surprised by this information. She was not prepared for it. The girl finally realized the situation and screamed. She hadn't wanted to marry him at all. The girl clutched the hem of her dress out of nerves and stared at one spot. She didn't know what to do. Duke Baldwin sat opposite her, and apparently her nervousness had rubbed off on him. He apologized to Yuri for arriving unannounced. The girl said there was no need to apologize. She had no problem with it. But why did he come? He certainly looks amazing. He apologized again and asked if Lady Hess could be here. Yuria replied that no, she had recently gone home. It was clear from the face of young Duke Baldwin that he was upset by the absence of Nadia Hess. He heard that she had arrived at Count Crimson's estate, but he had arrived at the wrong time. He had missed her. Yuria wondered why the Duke was looking for Lady Hess so suddenly. She didn't think she'd ever seen him like this. Then it dawned on Lady Yuria. She simply couldn't even think about it. The Duke has developed an interest in Lady Hess? How can that be possible? The girl was incredibly interested. But asking directly would be very rude, right? Lady Crimson tried to digest what she had just realized. She decided to tell him, although she didn't know if it would be useful, but Lady Hess was invited to the next party at Blanche's family. This was, of course, very useful for Duke Baldwin. He was delighted. The man rested his chin on his fist and considered what he had just learned. After some further thought, he decided to address Lady Crimson. He asked her if she could help him. The man was serious. It was evident on his face. The Duke of Blanche's estate was simply stunning. The light-colored building glowed in the night light from the numerous candles and lanterns, and the inside was just as beautiful as the outside. Just look at the huge magical chandelier. Blanche's family parties are always truly glamorous, and there's no denying that. You can feel the elegance in every detail, worthy of one of the two great ducal families of the empire. It's impossible not to admire it. But if you think back, did one of the party guests hear that the Crimson family was here too? Well, the Crimsons and Blanche have always been close. The rest of the conversation is inaudible. Among the large number of people, Vivian could be seen with some man. The man secretly handed the maid some kind of envelope tied with string. The giant doors with wonderful patterns opened, letting in a beam of light. Nadia Hess asked Vivi if the man she just met was sent by Conrad. Vivian elegantly closed the massive doors so that no one would hear her conversation with Nadia Hess. The girl looked at her mistress and smiled sweetly at her. Yes. Vivian received a letter from the boss. It's the answer to the question Lady Hess asked for. They discovered Count Crimson's extremely suspicious activities. The Count is a member of the salon run by the Marquise Alain. At first glance, it seems like a place for a casual discussion of literature, but if you dig deeper, it appears that there is a separate secret meeting. Count Crimson's pseudonym is Laban. Given his use of a pseudonym, it's safe to say he's involved in activities where his identity cannot be revealed. This is a list of participants whose identities have been established so far. Entry is permitted only to high-ranking nobles or a small group of people invited by them. Therefore, they have not yet been able to determine exactly what is happening inside. Nadia wonders if she should approach him directly and try to get an invitation, or perhaps exploit one of their weaknesses and try to exploit them. The girl ordered Vivi to first take a closer look at the participants on that list. If they found a common thread, they would be able to determine the purpose of this meeting. She also told her to keep an eye on Count Crimson as planned. If Nadia saw anyone on the list at the party, she would try to communicate with them. The girl stood up and was about to go into the hall, but Vivian stopped her. The girl stopped. It was somehow strange, as if something had happened. Vivian smiled slyly and said that work was work, but she should enjoy the party. Vivi began to comb her mistress's wonderful red hair and tidy it up. Vivi will take full responsibility for keeping an eye on that vile Count Crimson. So Vivian asked her mistress not to worry about it anymore, and she asked Nadia Hess to show everyone that her ladyship is the most beautiful girl in the world. These words were very pleasant to Lady Hess, and even inspired her. The party guests discussed how they'd never heard of the Hess family. Someone said they were sure the barony was located in the north, but they didn't know the baron had a daughter. Nadia walked around the hall and thought that first She needed to greet the young duchess. But Nadia couldn't find her. She thought that if she could find where people were gathering, she heard someone talking about her. Someone said that the name Nadia Hess seemed to sound very familiar to her. They're that upstart family. They've made a nice profit on magic stones recently, haven't they? The Hess barony may have tasted wealth, but she's not sure they're up to par. She wonders what connections she made to get here. Another person said that she might have used the money for magic stones to buy a place just to make some connections. People were literally judging Nadia behind her back. She thinks looking pretty is enough? That's pathetic. The young Duke, Archie's Blanche, appeared. The man was looking for Lady Hess. The man finally found her and approached the girl from behind, saying that thank God he found her. The girl was a little scared by the sudden appearance of her friend, but as soon as she turned to him and saw his calm appearance, she immediately calmed down. He said he was glad the girl had come to the party. Surely he hadn't passed up the chance to become her partner. The people discussing Lady Hess were very surprised. He would very much like to take the place of her partner, because Lady Hess is his guest. The girl said she came alone, so Arkish's chance hadn't been missed. He was very happy about this. The guy said there were some people he'd like to introduce them to. Would she like to go for a walk with him? The girl said she was fine with it. The young Duke took the girl by the arm, and they went for a walk around the estate. Lady Hess noticed that there were no people where they had come. Oe asked Aris where the people he wanted her to meet were. The man glanced slyly at his companion. He remained silent, but later he said it was actually a lie. The girl didn't understand what the young Duke was getting at. The man said that crowded places are uncomfortable and there are so many reasons to worry. Besides, the young Duke said that it was much better to spend time with Nadia here, wasn't it? The girl listened to the guy with great surprise. She still didn't understand what he was getting at, but when she realized that the Duke wanted to spend time with her alone, she smiled and became embarrassed. The Duke and Nadia were on the terrace, both gazing at the bottomless, star-studded sky. The guy apologized to her. If he had arrived earlier, she would not have had to deal with such rudeness. Since he had personally invited her, he wanted to leave Lady Hess with only good memories. The girl was pleased to hear this from the young Duke. Nadia guessed said everything was fine. She was used to it. Arkish was surprised and asked again. The girl said that it certainly sounds strange, but everything is really fine. Nadia said she'd been given a position she didn't deserve, so the conversation was inevitable. Nadia heard this throughout her time as Lavinia, until she grew tired of it. There were times when she felt it was unfair and when she felt sad. But if anger makes her feel even more miserable, and if this is just weakness, then it's better to stop feeling anything. The young Duke watched the girl as she talked about herself. He said it was fascinating. She was quite young, but unlike her peers, she seemed more mature. Hess said she'd heard that a lot. The man sank into thought again. Lady Hess's company was very pleasant. Few people could comfortably allow him to fall into thought. He turned to the girl again, and she looked at him. The man moved closer to the lady and said that he didn't think he liked her saying that everything was fine. The girl was very surprised. She did not understand absolutely anything of what was happening. The young Duke simply looked at her without saying or doing anything. But in the end, he said, on the day she visited Count Crimson's estate, Nadia also said everything was fine. The man said he knew a little about her, but it didn't give the impression that she was lying. However, the boy paused. He was truly very interested in Lady Hess. He asked her if she wanted to look at something, and asked her to come a little closer. The girl listened to him and came closer, and he extended his hand. Mana began to form in his hand. A small ball of energy floated above his hand. The girl was stunned by the sight. She looked at his mana as if it were something unearthly. Although it is unearthly, she asked if it was magic and decided to touch his mana. He said yes, it was magic, and if Nadia learned it, she could do the same. The man began to think about how to continue the dialogue with Lady Hess, and waited until she had admired the radiance. He said the best way to become a mage is to control mana. That's why this path is open only to a select few. However, the curses are different. Unlike magic, which requires preparation, curses require only hatred and the desire to express it. This makes them even more dangerous, because it doesn't require any special talent. Anyone can easily cast them, sometimes without any reason, and sometimes even spontaneously, because it corrodes a person's soul. Suddenly, the mana in Arhis's hand changed color. It seemed dirty. After all, any curse, whatever is said, will definitely return to the sender. The girl noticed changes in the manalite and was horrified. The man didn't look at her. He silently showed and told her about himself. He pulled his tainted mana to his heart, and it closed within him again. He said that if you get used to unkind words, you eventually start to mistake them for the truth. And yet, Arhis asked, why doesn't Nadia start believing in herself a little more? From what he saw, Nadia was a beautiful grown-up girl. She listened attentively to the Duke and pondered his words. Believe in herself? Honestly, she's still not sure how she can believe in herself, or even try. But she thanked him. She felt as if the young Duke Aris had cheered her up a little. Well, the Duke suggested they really enjoy the party. Nadia asked what he meant, but the guy didn't hear her question as he dragged her into the hall. Music blared from Duke Aris's estate. Nearby, carriages carrying visiting guests stood. Duke Blanche and young Lady Hess were drinking wine and chatting casually. Their glasses touched in the distance with a Gian. The liquid in the glasses rippled. The young Duke and Lady Nadia chatted and laughed sweetly, as if they had known each other all their lives. Lady Hess sat down with difficulty on the luxurious sofa. She looked tired. There were glasses on the table, empty, and it was precisely because the glasses were not filled that Our Lady Nadia was not feeling very well. The girl had almost guessed the reason for her discomfort. She was getting hotter and hotter. Even though it's late, there's still a huge crowd of people at the party. The girl noticed someone and began to watch. Through the crowd, the girl saw two suspicious men who were chatting. Nadia couldn't make out what they were saying, but she thought they were the men on the list. The men began to head towards the exit of the hall. Fragments of phrases could be heard, but they were not enough to form a dialogue. The girl realized that they were leaving, and she understood that she could not miss them, so she got up and went after them. The men walked down a dark corridor, lit only by the bright moonlight. They walked slowly forward, talking as they went. One of them said the day of truth had arrived. It's impossible to imagine how many times his faith had wavered over the past 10 years. The second man, with darker, longer hair, agreed. He said they had succeeded after all. Lady Hess hid behind a corner and eavesdropped. They were saying that the White Swan did exist after all. The girl didn't understand what White Swan they were talking about. The day of truth, which they had been waiting for so long, and the White Swan. What were they planning? The men quickened their pace and began to turn the corner, moving away from Lady Hess. The girl noticed this and realized that she needed to find out their plans, so she began to pursue them. The girl accidentally hit the ledge, which naturally caused the sound. Of course, Lady Nadia's targets heard the noise and turned around abruptly. They asked who was there, and the girl realized she was about to be exposed. Nadia realized that if she was discovered, she was dead. So she quickly began to retreat. The girl was already running to hide, but suddenly a man's hand reached out to her. It was Duke Baldwin. He pulled Nadia towards him and hugged her tightly. Nadia was terribly scared and was about to ask who it was, but she saw it with her own eyes. Duke Baldwin briefly told her to calm down, as this could attract attention. He continued to hold the girl's fragile figure close to him. The man said that the most important thing right now was to get out of here. Lady Hess was terribly nervous. She was in Henry's hands. She was tormented by the question of how he ended up in Blanche's house, so she asked him directly. But of course the man didn't answer. He put his finger to his lips, indicating that he should remain quiet. One man told another he heard a noise. The second said someone was probably hiding in the hallway. He told the first to check every inch. The man covered Lady Hess with his stately body. They said that if someone had overheard their conversation, they could be in big trouble. But the other one said nothing would happen. There was no critical information. Even so, it's just in case. If there's even the slightest chance they'll run into trouble, they'll figure it out themselves. The girl trembled. Heinrich pressed her a little closer and noticed that her hair was as pleasant as Labania's, but quickly mentally chastised himself for such thoughts. The first man came close to the hiding couple and said that the sound seemed to be coming from there. The man called his companion and waited for him to approach. The second man approached and shouted, asking who was hiding there. There was no one there. The men realized they had run off somewhere and decided to catch up with them as quickly as possible. The first man finally looked around the entire room where they were and found nothing suspicious. So the two men set out to find the scoundrels who were eavesdropping on them. And Gainey and Nadia didn't even move from their place. Thank God they weren't discovered. Henry said it was safe now. One of his subordinates distracted them, suggesting they leave while they could. The girl looked at her Gainey with great embarrassment. She had never felt so awkward. If Vivian had seen this scene, it was impossible to even imagine what would have happened. The man extended his hand, and the girl extended hers in return. Nadia thanked him, but she was still tormented by the question. What was Duke Baldwin doing here? So she asked the question again. The girl hadn't heard that this man had come to the party, but he ended up here. Henry said they should leave for now. They approached the gazebo, and the Duke said they could talk there. The girl stopped and looked at him. She asked him if he would answer her now. Why did he come here? What does he want here? It's hardly a debutante ball. The man's gaze grew stern again. His bottomless eyes stared straight into Nadia. Duke Baldwin honestly admitted to her that he was looking for her. Nadia was so surprised by this that she even asked again to make sure. He said he didn't know if she knew about it, but one can see many traces of his wife that lead straight to Nadia. It's truly strange. Every time he follows the tracks she left behind, Lady Hess's name appears everywhere, and he sees her shadow. He said that she knew something that related to Lavinia and was hiding this fact from the Duke. Why she does this is irrelevant to the Duke. There's some clue connected to Lavinia, and he'll find it at any cost, even if it meant he would have to threaten her safety. The girl was frightened by such threats, but was also surprised by his devotion to her past self. The girl said that the fact that Henry was telling her this now meant that he has already changed his mind about this situation. Henry turned away from the girl, falling into further thoughts. There were more than one or two suspicious moments, not only in what happened earlier, but also in her actions. There were many contradictions. The man still stood with his back to Lady Hess and continued talking. He remembered Nadia's words about not wanting him to suffer. Why had he felt she was in more pain than he was? The man mentally compared the appearance of Lavinia and Lady Nadia Hess. Why does this look remind him so much of his beloved Lavinia? It haunts him. Duke Baldwin did not want to show her his face at that sincere and tender moment for him. He said this was the last chance he could give her. If she answered his questions, only this time would he believe her. So please. The man came close to Lady Hess and asked her to make the right decision. The girl exhaled and summed it up, saying that in other words, she had no option to refuse. Lady Hess clenched her hands in fear, but agreed anyway. She said she would tell him everything. To summarize, like Conrad, she was a secret henchman of Lavinia, and based on suspicious traces found at the scene of the accident, Nadia concluded that someone had deliberately provoked it. She determined that Count Crimson was the most likely suspect, and she'd been trying to dig into him ever since. Heinrich asked, "Is that true?" He added that he still had a lot to ask, but for now he understood the situation. And speaking of the salon of the Marquise Alain, which Nadia Hess mentioned, naturally, Conrad couldn't get there. He was under imperial protection. At first glance, this salon may appear to be an ordinary meeting place. In fact, it is a gathering place for certain members of the nobility to carry out dubious acts on behalf of the imperial family. In exchange, the imperial palace protects them. It is not yet clear whether they are actually connected to Lavinia, but they won't know without a more thorough investigation. In that case, he'll take it up. Suddenly, a couple of socialites noticed them. One lady screamed and said that Mr. Baldwin had come to the party after all. The girls said it was an unexpected and pleasant meeting. How many years had passed since they last saw each other at banquets? Count Reuben was spreading rumors that the Duke's health had worsened, but the girl believed it was just a rumor. Moreover, it's surprising that he's here with Lady Hess, and in such a secluded place. The man glanced at Nadia, who began to worry after the lady's words. Henry said the lady had misunderstood them. The Duke turned to the girl. The man approached her as if embracing her and asked if he could assume that their intentions coincided. He would appreciate her brief assistance. The girl didn't understand what he was talking about, but she seemed to catch Duke Baldwin's drift and agreed to play along. He pointedly told the ladies that he had already gone a little too far. The young Duke gently tucked a fallen strand of Lady Hess's hair behind her ear. He extended his hand to Lady Hess and said that while he was with her, he forgot about time. The Duke paused for a moment, still extending his hand, and offered to go, addressing her simply by her first name, simply Nadia. Lady Hess was so shocked it was beyond words. The ladies watched and were equally astonished. The ladies apologized for their tactlessness and said that they would not be disturbed again. One woman turned around before leaving and wished the couple a pleasant time. Two women with perfect posture walked away into the distance. The girl wanted to explain herself to the ladies, but decided to take out her anger on Henry. Why did he do this? What if people misunderstand them? But Gainey calmly said that those were exactly his intentions. The girl didn't understand. The imperial family is interested in the Duke's marriage, and for them, the marriage between Henry and the Crimson family is already a done deal. But if an unexpected scandal suddenly arises, for those who took everything as fact, this will be quite interesting news. The girl understood. Is he trying to provoke the Count's henchmen hiding behind the imperial family? But still, is this really normal? Because it looks weird. If he accidentally offends the imperial family, Henry could be in danger. And if this continues and she continues to contact Gainey, what if her resolve, which arose that day, wavers? The man silently examined Lady Nadia. She reminded him so much of his Lavinia. He doesn't want to force her. The situation can still be clarified if they take action now. However, if Nadia Hess cooperates, he promises to reward her generously, not only financially, but also in terms of status. The girl began to deny the reward. The man was also turned away. He knows it's dangerous for Nadia. He understands, but Hess is the only one he can ask for help. Only Nadia shares the memories of Lavinia he remembers. Lady Hess paused. The girl understood that working with him would be a disadvantage, but the girl didn't understand one thing. Why? Why, when he said her name, so sad and unhappy? Just why? What's the reason for this behavior? Why until now? They were still in the gazebo under the cover of night, and the girl was thinking about her answer. But Nadia agreed. She would cooperate with him. After all, she said, she had a duty to Lady Lavinia. Henry was surprised, but she has one question. If he learns the cause of Lady Lavinia's death, will his wounds heal? Duke Baldwin remained silent. He truly didn't know how to answer this difficult question. He wasn't sure. However, if the Duke ever saw his wife again, then, standing before her, he would be able to stand a little prouder. The girl wasn't entirely satisfied with the Duke's answer. She gave a short, "I see," and lowered her head, but she immediately gave him a cheerful smile, not showing him her true emotions, and thanked him for his answer. Come to think of it, Nadia didn't know the Duke knew Blanche's family. She hadn't heard any stories of them meeting. The Duke said there was no connection between them. The girl was a little confused and didn't understand him. That's why he could only get into the party as Lady Crimson's escort. The girl was slightly stunned by what she learned from Duke Baldwin. She said she understood, but she was still thinking. So Gainey came as Lady Crimson's partner. They walked for some time in complete silence, broken only by the sound of night insects. By the way, Henry said that if rumors spread about the relationship between Lady Hess and Duke Baldwin, then Lady Crimson would also be happy. When he asked her to help him meet Lady Hess, she seemed quite enthusiastic. The girl exhaled, having overthought things. Thank goodness Yuri's lady was involved in this. But suddenly, she didn't understand her feelings. Why did Lady Hess feel relieved? Henry stopped. The man extended his hand to his companion and said that now, perhaps they'll back up these rumors. Of course, it's still unclear how they'll back them up, but it's certainly interesting. Duke Baldwin and Lady Hess entered the party hall, and all eyes were immediately drawn to them. The man looked calm, while Lady Hess was very embarrassed. The Duke did not hesitate to stare at his companion, while she tried in every possible way not to even look in Henry's direction. The mere thought of her angry father made the girl shudder and feel terrified. One of the ladies who caught the Duke and Lady Hess told the Count that the man chose exactly this one. Lady Hess felt very uncomfortable. She felt every glance directed at them. Suddenly, the young Duke appeared. He was worried about Nadia. He was looking for her because she had suddenly disappeared. The girl apologized. She explained that she felt dizzy and had gone out to get some fresh air. The young Duke noticed Duke Baldwin. Henry greeted him, albeit belatedly, and said it had been a long time since they had seen each other. Archis couldn't remember the last time they had met. Henry told Nadia it had been an honor to accompany her. He said they would see each other again. He had to go now. and Duke Baldwin began to leave, leaving Arkish and Nadia alone. The Duke and Nadia watched Duke Baldwin. Duke Blanche asked Lady Hesse how her head was. If she felt better, But Lady Hesse didn't hear him. She stared at the Duke in the distance. Aris addressed her, trying to draw her attention to himself. He decided to look where Lady Nadia was staring, and he saw the Duke. He was talking to someone. The Duke, of course, was a model of stateliness and beauty. All the society ladies wanted to at least converse with him, regardless of status or anything else. Arhis also watched the Duke's every action, but soon he got tired of it. He decided to see if Lady Hesse had detached herself from her former companion, but he saw only a gaze that remained fixed on Duke Baldwin. The young Duke found this strange. He also felt slightly offended by the girl's lack of attention, but he decided the girl was simply too tired, and there was no point in being offended or anything else. The guy smiled. He turned to her. He said that Lady Hesse was probably tired. Perhaps she should go and rest. He would lead the girl to the carriage. The girl finally took a break from her thoughts and agreed. Lady Hesse placed her gentle hand in Duke Blanche's and thanked him. Holding hands, the young couple headed out of the estate. Count Crimson watched them from the high balcony. So that's how it is. Apparently, rage began to develop in the man's heart and soul. His gaze focused specifically on Lady Hesse. He treated her as an inferior creature. This is her, the heart of the white swan, which was intended for them. The man watched the girl with an angry gaze. Isn't that wonderful? They say he started appearing at social events quite often, and they're talking about Duke Baldwin. She's always been bright, but lately she seemed so upset that she's worried about her. The girl asked another man if she was having any thoughts. He's probably going to meet his beloved. Rumor has it that he and the Baron's daughter, Lady Hesse, have exactly that kind of relationship. The socialites were gossiping. One maid turned to another. Back then, in the mine of magical stones, the Duke had already fallen in love with the mind of their young lady. Someone heard they were already engaged. The rivalry between the families was so serious that they were seen by someone's uncle's friend, and there were a whole bunch of other rumors about the Duke and Lady Hesse. So, are these rumors true? The young ladies turned to Lady Hesse. Nadia felt very awkward. She didn't know what to answer to such a question, so she hesitated. While the two girls stood waiting with sparkling eyes, Lady Hesse thought about what to say. The girl thought to herself, this is a problem. So many rumors, it's complicated. The Duke was communicating with some representatives of the secular stratum of humanity. Lady Hesse turned and began to examine Duke Baldwin. Of course, the man felt the girl's gaze on him and turned around. Duke Baldwin looked her straight in the eye and smiled kindly. He hadn't seemed as stern as usual lately. Nadia was so embarrassed that a blush appeared on her cheeks, and the two ladies in the back simply couldn't find their place. This is a real problem. Lady Hesse was at her estate. The girl sat on a chair, drinking tea and eating desserts that she bought in that store. The Duke stood next to the girl. He was also participating in the tea party. Nadia turned to him. She said she knew this was all just a ploy to fool the people, and to ensure the scandal reached the imperial family, we'd better appear together more often. But there's one but. The girl reached for a cup of hot, aromatic tea. He shouldn't go that far. The girl found that little phrase hard to swallow. Henry gave her quite a lot of treasure, and in general, many expensive gifts. He publicly declared his affection for her, and much more. Nadia thought that at this rate, Gainey would never get married. He said that it went without saying if they did not want to tarnish the Duke's name. And that's precisely why there's an effect. Although weak, it's better than nothing, much better. The Duke had told her earlier that his marriage into the Crimson family was a foregone conclusion. But after the party at Blanche's estate, rumors about them spread quickly, causing a breakdown in the trust of Count Crimson's supporters. The aristocrats, who had previously hesitated, began to distance themselves from the Count one by one. If they maintain the atmosphere and observe the actions of the nobles and Count Crimson, they will be able to get new clues in the near future. Suddenly, the man changed his tone and became much more serious than he had been before. He said that of course the same applies to the White Swan and the Day of Truth. Nadia remembered that the very people she was following had spoken about this. However, Henry asked her to concentrate on the upcoming debutante ball. The girl had apparently already forgotten about it. Since it is very likely that the Emperor will be interested in her, it is better to prepare in advance. Lady Hess's face darkened as soon as she imagined it all in reality. Henry thought that this girl might appear at the debutante ball. You need to prepare properly. First, you need to choose a dress. The man looked at his companion and wondered what dress he would imagine her in. He thought that her red hair would go well with a dress in softer shades. The man believed that there was no point in bulky accessories. She didn't need them. The man continued to look at the girl, imagining her in completely different outfits. The Duke looked at her bright eyes and immediately understood something. Of course, the eyes should stand out the most. But wait, Duke Baldwin immediately caught himself thinking about her eyes. How similar they were to Labenia's. Henry tried to put these thoughts out of his head and try to concentrate on her appearance at the ball. Nadia became uneasy under such intense scrutiny and asked the Duke if there was something on her face. Gainey immediately lowered his gaze and said everything was fine. He said those were unnecessary thoughts. In any case, if she needed anything, let her know. And so, everything that she wants or everything that she needs will be hers. Nadia remembered a moment from her past life where she said that Gainey had tried hard and she would definitely reward him. The girl tried to push such thoughts away from herself because they were of no use now. But little Gainey didn't leave. She remembered how he'd asked for a dance, just a dance with her. Now she was looking at the grown-up Henry, the stately Duke Baldwin. The girl made up her mind. She asked Duke Baldwin to teach her to dance. They swapped places. The man was surprised by the girl's request. A sense of déjà vu immediately washed over him. He asked again, "A dance, you say?" The girl said yes, a dance. Lady Hess said she didn't need anything in particular. She just wanted to be with him, with the Duke, as in the old days. Together? And then the girl realized what she had just done. It was so stupid. The girl immediately began to justify herself. She said she didn't mean it that way. She'd forgotten herself. She'd given in to her emotions and hadn't realized it. Nadia immediately changed the subject. She said she'd taken lessons, of course, but she had no practical experience. She was afraid she might make a mistake and get him in trouble. And look at his face. Same as always. The girl tried to squeeze something else out of herself so that she would forget what she had said before. But it didn't work. She began to apologize and ask to forget about what she said. The man gave a short, "Very good," and the girl didn't quite understand him. Duke Baldwin rose from his chair and straightened his jacket. He said he had some free time, so they could devote it to practice. They could go straight away if there was a suitable space. The girl stared at the Duke. He looked as if nothing had happened at all. Lady Hess stood with her hands clasped together from nerves and simply blushed. "What's going on anyway? How did they get here?" "You reap what you sow." The man was already standing ready. N had taken off his jacket, remaining in only his vest and shirt. Duke Baldwin said there should be enough space in this room for the lesson. Henry extended his manly hand to her and invited her to begin. Lady Hess, after a slight hesitation, extended her hand in return. Their hands touched. Lady Nadia asked the Duke to guide her. The girl felt so awkward, and even more awkward because it all showed in her trembling and the redness on her face. The man really did guide her, just as she had asked, and it seemed to be working. Some time passed. At first it was very awkward, but later the tension eased. The girl raised her head and looked straight into Duke Baldwin's eyes. The man, due to the difference in height, lowered his head and fixed his gaze on Lady Hess. She fell back into a cage filled with memories of a past life. The child who was waist-high to her as a child, now he is so much taller than her that she has to lift her head up. The palm that had once been smaller and softer than hers had become hard and large enough to cover hers. And it's true! Her little young fiancé grew up into such a wonderful adult without her knowledge. All these 10 years, she did not know how this beautiful young man grew up. The man in the dance stepped forward, keeping time. Lady Hess tried the same, but she still fell behind. Duke Baldwin noticed this. She began to fall half a step behind. He frowned. It was exactly the same habit as his beloved Labenia. Nadia claims to have learned a lot from his wife. Did she also pick up this habit? But the man stopped himself. He decided it wasn't worth giving in to useless thoughts. The dancing couple slowly moved their feet, so as not to step on anyone and to understand all the movements. Duke Baldwin remembered how he and Lavinia had danced like that, and his dance with Nadia had something similar. The Duke was so small then, but so happy. It was Labinia's presence at his side that made him happy. He remembered how she taught him to dance, but he couldn't do it and blushed, while his wife supported him, a little boy who tried his best to hide his shyness, kindness that quietly and imperceptibly manifested itself in the form of understanding of his immaturity. Even so, the young duke always tried to look her in the eyes. When their eyes met, Lavinia smiled softly, as if to say that everything was fine. The man drew a parallel in his mind. He and Lavinia 10 years ago, and now, he and Nadia, they looked the same, just bigger, of course. The feeling was similar. Unfortunately, their hands parted, as they once did. The Duke said he didn't think she should worry at this stage. Nadia said she had no practical experience, but she was a near-perfect dancer. This pleased the girl. Heinrich said that if Nadia needed anything, she should speak up. He would help her no matter what. The man opened the door and walked out of the room, leaving Lady Hess alone. He added that the girl shouldn't be afraid of anything. He would always be on her side. The girl was very touched by these words. She was very pleased to hear this from her Heine. The girl showed him out, thanked him, and went to the back of the room. It confused and inspired her so much that a whole flock of butterflies fluttered in her stomach. Lady Hess's cheeks were simply flushed pink. The girl could not find a place for herself. In the daylight, the Duchy of Blanche's estate looked luxurious. There was an abundance of all kinds of delicious things, desserts and other things on the table. Lady Uriah approached Arkisa and asked if he knew about the rumors. About Lady Hess and Duke Baldwin. There's a rumor that they're dating. Yuri asked if he thought it was true or not. The girl really hoped that she played a very significant role in this. She thought it would certainly help when she later reconciled with Lady Hess, didn't she? Archie's Blanche left his teacup in the saucer. The young Duke wasn't very talkative today. He thought about what Lady Crimson had said. He was genuinely interested. Lady Hess was in the store. She faced a difficult choice. What's better? The girl couldn't decide at all. Vivian asked if Lady Hess intended to give Duke Baldwin a gift. She did, as she had received much from him during this time. The maid thought for a moment, and then remembered all the Duke's gifts. He recently sent a very expensive dress, didn't he? That's right. It was custom-made, so the girl couldn't return it. A consultant approached Lady Hess. She said that if Lady Hess had no ideas, how about choosing an item that would suit her image? The consultant asked the girl what color comes to mind when she thinks of this person. The girl wondered what color she associated with Duke Baldwin. Various memories from their recent interactions began to come to Lady Hess's mind. The girl imagined the great Duke Baldwin holding her gentle hand. She imagined the focused gaze he usually had on her. The girl froze in her thoughts, remembering everything connected with him. After thinking for a short while, the girl chose the decoration without any hesitation. The girl pointed her finger and asked to give her the brooch. This brooch was in the shape of a cross, silver with stones, rubies to be precise. The consultant was surprised and said it was a wonderful choice. This gemstone symbolizes an unchanging heart. It will definitely be a special gift for the recipient. The girls left the shop. Lady Hess thought she'd found the perfect gift, but it turned out to be more expensive than she thought. It was good that it was enough, but she had no money left. It's okay. He'll just be patient for a little while, and everything will be fine. Vivian asked if everything was okay with the lady. Lady Hess heard some unintelligible conversation, and this attracted her attention. It turned out to be Lady Uriah. She was angry and shouting that she was fed up with this. She'll be walking alone today, so Aris shouldn't bother her anymore. Aris asked her to stop, but Uriah told him not to follow her. The man was upset because he cares and worries about her. The young Duke was terribly tired of this. Uriah was too hyperactive. Uriah left, and the man felt that he was not alone. After searching for the reason for this feeling, he turned his head in the right direction and noticed someone. He noticed Lady Hess and her maid, Vivian. The boy felt a little ashamed. The girl was also confused and decided to wave her hand to the young Duke. The man put his hands to his head and thought about how shameful it was. Arkis asked, "She must have been feeling unwell, right?" He really was very sorry. Lady Hess said she was fine and he shouldn't worry. Lady Nadia tried to look the boy in the eye. She said that if he didn't mind, could Lady Hess clarify what led to their quarrel? Arkish said he felt like he'd put too much pressure on Yuri. A little earlier, there had been a performance in the square, and Yuri, captivated by the song, wanted to make a splash. The Duke, trying to stop her, unconsciously raised his voice. which is why everything escalated into a quarrel. Lady Hesse listened very attentively to the young Duke of Archis. She asked if he had a reason for this. Nadia said that she didn't think that Arkish would do something like that, just like that, without any reason. The man looked away from Lady Hesse and thought for a couple of seconds again. In fact, Yuri is a very weak child. If she overexerts herself, she can easily develop health problems, which have sometimes lasted for a very long time. The young Duke paused in his story and clasped his fingers together. And it's his fault. Yuria's health problems are the young Duke's fault. That was a long time ago. As a child, Yuria had no one she could call a friend. Under Count Crimson's strict supervision, Yuri's relationships with others were subject to many restrictions. That's why Yuri often followed Arhis around. He believes that in such a situation, he was the only one she could approach with peace of mind. He remembered how Yuri's little girl came up to him and called him by name. He remembered himself as a little boy. Almost the same as he is now, only a few times smaller and angrier. At the time, this kind of thing irritated him, so he rejected her attention. He avoided her, hid and turned away from this little child. It was raining that evening. Arkish was feeling very sensitive about something, so he said a few harsh words to Yuri. It wasn't a fight, but a one-sided way to vent his emotions. Even knowing this, he could not overcome his pride and left in a fit of anger. But Yuri followed him to make peace. It was important to her. The girl was running across a dilapidated wooden bridge, and one board cracked. The young Duke turned around at the sound and saw a terrible picture for small eyes. The little girl was falling. The boards couldn't hold her. They were damp from the endless rain. Horror was evident on little Aris's face. He froze. He couldn't believe that this was happening. The girl's umbrella lay somewhere in the distance, and she was falling into the cold water under the bridge. Little Aris gathered all his strength and ran after the girl with all his might, shouting her name. He told Nadia that the bridge couldn't support Yuri and collapsed. The raging current engulfed her, and after that day, she was ill for a long time. He said it was all his fault. If Arkish hadn't pushed her then and had been honest, none of this would have happened. The truth is, he's always worried. What if the things he did for Yuria still made her feel uneasy? He thinks about it constantly. The girl felt sincerely sorry for Arkisa, who was a child and not guilty of anything, and Yuri, who became a victim of circumstances. The young Duke wept. He was terribly ashamed. His conscience gnawed at him to this day. But he quickly came to his senses and asked for forgiveness for putting Lady Hesse into a stupor. It would be better if she forgot all about it. But the girl curtly replied, "No." She wanted to help the young Duke overcome his feelings of guilt. She said she felt like she had some understanding of what that feeling was like. The girl remembered her past life. The more precious a person is, the stricter you are. She remembered how, when she was Libenia, she left Heinrich alone, even knowing that we are causing pain, in the end. We can't do anything. The girl returned to the real world from the world of memories. Her lips trembled slightly, but she didn't want to show Aris anything unnecessary. So the girl pulled herself together and smiled. She turned to the guy. Lady Hesse told him not to blame himself too much. Nalia is sure Lady Crimson also understands that all this stems from his concern for her. If he has a conflict with a loved one, just tell him everything sincerely and make peace. Even if it seems too late or the wound is too deep, everything can be fixed while you are alive. So, isn't it better to worry at least a little less? If they need a reason to meet, Lady Nadia can help with that. Suddenly, the young Duke rested his head on Lady Hesse's shoulder. It was unexpected and strange. The girl looked at it and was stunned. What was this? How could this be explained? The man lay there as if nothing had happened, as if that was how it should be, as if he had just laid his head on the pillow before going to sleep. Lady Nadia Hesse turned to the man because she thought it was too strange. He only opened his eyes slightly. He stood up abruptly and apologized. He said he hadn't even noticed how he'd gotten carried away by the moment. Arkis thanked Nadia for her advice. It seemed Lady Hesse was truly a good person. The girl was pleased to hear this from the young Duke. Nadia Hesse turned away in embarrassment and tried to deny his conclusion. She said she didn't know if he remembered, but he had consoled her too. The girl reciprocated his words and said that he, sir, was truly a good man. Now the young Duke Blanche was completely embarrassed by such words. The Duke said that if Nadia needed help, she should contact him. No matter what, he would do everything possible to help. The girl blushed again. For some reason, everyone loves to embarrass Lady Hess. Young Lady Yuria walked alone through the capital's crowded streets. She looked upset. She thought that she had gone too far in her conversation with the young count. The young lady was so angry that she couldn't do what she wanted. But R was just worried about her. I need to go back and apologize. And it's better to keep quiet, for now. The girl came to her senses a little and realized she had lost Arhis. She wondered where he was. Lady Yuria noticed Arhis on the bench, but he wasn't alone. He was with Lady Hess. The girl was worried. What if they were judging her? Or was the Duke complaining about her and Lady Hess supporting him? She thought that perhaps Lady Hess was very angry with her. Lady Yuria recalled the recent events at her estate related to her father. The girl was sincerely worried about Lady Nadia's attitude towards her. She didn't want it to be bad. After standing and thinking for a while, Yuria realized that this was her chance to apologize to Lady Hess. They hadn't seen each other since, so there was no time for apologies. They couldn't even run into each other at Arkish's reception. And finally, this is an opportunity to truly apologize to Nadia. Lady Yuria believed that this was a chance sent to her by God to apologize. That is why the girl stood as if enchanted and praised, and thanked God in her thoughts. Lady Yuria, like a spy, was spying on her cousin and Lady Hess. She was gathering her strength to approach. The girl decided to rehearse, because she needed to understand where to start. The phrase, "Long time no see, Lady Hess," came to mind. Maybe I should start like that? And then, "I made a terrible mistake that day. I'm so sorry. I don't share my father's opinion." These were the phrases Yuria came up with. Then she began to think about how to address Lady Hess, and settled on the option of simply Nadia. Then the girl imagined herself approaching Lady Hess and offering to become her friend. The girl was deciding where to start and how to finish. And finally, she made up her mind. Yuria began to encourage herself to become bolder and take action. Suddenly, someone's voice was heard. Someone was so overjoyed to see Lady Crimson that the girl became frightened. It turned out to be a lady. She said she was very pleased to meet her there. The lady asked Yuria if she had also gone out shopping. It was a very awkward moment, so Lady Crimson was very confused and said yes. The lady asked if she was alone or with someone. The young lady turned and noticed the young Duke and Lady Hess. She said that this was the same girl who seduced Duke Baldwin. And now, apparently, she's hanging around Monsieur Blanche. What a shame. Yuria was upset to hear this about Lady Nadia. A stranger asked Lady Crimson if she had a special relationship with the Duke. Did Yuri want this lady to go and embarrass Nadia? This girl thought it would be an incredible success if she could score points with Lady Crimson now. Lady Yuria was angry. She asked the lady, who turned out to be Lady Headington, why she was insulting Lady Hess. Yuria said that R and Lady Hess were close friends. Therefore, the lady should not use harsh words towards her. Lady Headington did not expect this. Lady Crimson said that these two people were incredibly dear to her. Yuria said that if this girl humiliated them even once more, she would not let it go. The young gossiping lady was surprised. Wow, she just wanted to help. If Yuria didn't need it, so be it. She left. Lady Crimson was only glad that this young lady had left her. The girl watched her go with an angry look. She was pleased that she had protected Lady Hess. Lady Nadia noticed Lady Crimson and watched her actions. But this did not last very long, and she called her almost immediately. As soon as Lady Crimson saw Lady Hess, she immediately became worried. Since when has she been here? From the very beginning? What if she thinks Yuri is being slandered? Lady Nadia didn't even know where to begin. She felt just as awkward as Lady Crimson. Lady Yuria looked straight at Lady Nadia and became terribly worried about what she would think. Nadia, at the moment, simply addressed the girl without any claims. But in Lady Crimson's mind, she was already asking why Lady Yuria was gossiping about her. Lady Crimson was terribly upset by her own thoughts. It was a good thing she wasn't actually doing it. Yuria thought she was in trouble, just as Lady Nadia began to speak. How Yuria interrupted her and began to prove that it was all a misunderstanding. Yuria said she absolutely disagreed with that lady. She had never thought anything bad or negative about Lady Hess. Nadia tried to calm her down and said that wasn't what she meant at all. Nadia just wanted to thank her, but Yuria wouldn't stop. She said that even though she hadn't been able to spend enough time with her, She knew she was a kind person. Yuria wanted to get closer to her from the very beginning. This was not how she had imagined the moment of their second meeting. Nadia was, of course, shocked by such a monologue. But she listened attentively to the girl. Yuria thought, what a shameful sight this was. Everything went wrong from the very beginning. Lady Crimson couldn't contain her emotions and burst into tears. She said she just wanted to befriend Lady Nadia. The young duke approached the girl. She said she had always regretted how she had left the lady, and if they had a chance to meet again, Yuria was going to apologize properly and offer to become friends. Nadia did not at all understand the reason for Lady Crimson's strong feelings. Yuria cried profusely, while the duke tried to calm her down. Lady Hess decided to intervene. The girl walked toward the weeping lady. Nadia took the girl by both her arms and gently said that everything was fine. In the same kind and calm tone, Nadia said that she hadn't spoiled anything for Yuri at all. The girl held the young countess's hands. She said it was her first time in such a situation, and therefore she didn't know how to react or what to say. But Nadia is certain of one thing, and Lady Hess sincerely thanked the girl. She was pleased that Lady Crimson stood up for her and said she wanted to be friends. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes again. Lady Nadia had said something very important to Lady Crimson. Lady Nadia said she, too, had longed and wanted to become friends with Yuria. Lady Crimson thanked Nadia for such precious words, and Arkis watched the touching scene. Yuria said she would definitely become a good friend. Arkis was genuinely happy for the girl. This was her first real friend, and one he himself had confidence in. The young duke intervened and said that on such a wonderful day, it was necessary to create equally wonderful memories. Why don't they take a stroll through the center of the capital to celebrate their new friendship? Yuri asked, when R became Nadia's friend. He said that Yuri's friends were his friends too. Lady Crimson took Nadia by the hand and dragged her out for a walk, with Arkis following behind. Vivian looked at her new friends from the balcony and smiled. A group of friends came to the cafe. They occupied a great table and chatted. Lady Yuria drank a cappuccino with foam, which gave her a foamy mustache. Lady Nadia noticed this moment, and the girls laughed heartily. The majestic estate was beautiful in the light of the setting sun. Its architect was astonishing. Lady Crimson came home after a wonderful walk. The girl jumped onto the bed. She sat up and laughed. It was the best day of her life. She was truly happy. She rocked back and forth on the bed. She and Nadia had made up and gone shopping, just like real friends. Although Yuria's plan failed, she is very glad that everything turned out this way. But the young countess's fun was interrupted by the butler, who distracted her. He sadly informed the girl that the count wanted to see her. Lady Crimson thought that her father was probably just angry now. The mere thought of her angry father made the girl shudder and feel terrified. The girl stood and trembled completely, with fear of her own father. In addition, she was also very nervous, which is why she was tightly pinching the hem of her dress. She understood what her father wanted to talk about and decided that she would not betray Nadia, because she had promised her, whatever happens, she will not remain silent if someone dares to insult Lady Hess. After all, Nadia is her most precious and dear friend. Lady Yuria remembered the expression on Lady Hess's face at that moment. She remembered how embarrassed Nadia was. The girl overcame her fear and opened the heavy door to her father's office. The girl walked in, taking slow but confident steps in her slippers. Yuria approached her father. The count stood with his back to his daughter. She asked if he had called her. The grown man briefly replied that he did, and turned his profile to Yuria. He said that Lady Crimson must know herself what they were saying lately about Duke Baldwin. The man turned to face her with an angry expression. He said there were some very interesting rumors going around. The girl was still shaking, but she didn't want to show her fear to her father. That's what she thought. Count Crimson approached his daughter, calling her name. The man's hand rose above the face of the young Lady Crimson. She swung straight towards her. Yuria closed her eyes and cowered in fear, but fortunately, her father's heavy hand landed on the girl's shoulder. She felt its weight, as if it were pressing her into the floor. Her father told her not to worry. The girl couldn't believe these words, so she became even more tense, because don't worry from her father means exactly the opposite. Father said it was nothing more than a moment, nothing more than empty words. He says that in any case, Duchess Baldwin's place belongs to Yuria. The man said absolutely nothing would change. to her regret. Yuria completely didn't understand one thing. He wasn't angry. Is that even possible? But what meaning do Count Crimson's words convey? He was behaving very strangely. Even when her father wasn't angry, she was still scared, because her father simply couldn't get angry. But the girl still dared. She told the Count that no, this was not her place. She would not marry the Duke. The father's expression instantly darkened. He found it very unusual that the girl could object to him. He asked what she was talking about, but the girl said that everything was exactly as she had said. The girl continued. She supports the relationship between Duke Baldwin and Lady Hesse. Even if the two don't marry, her choice will remain the same. Her father told her to stop talking nonsense, because whether she wants it or not, she has no right to choose. Yuria's hands trembled. She said she didn't want to embarrass herself anymore, even if it meant going against his will. Therefore, Lady Crimson will never, under any circumstances, marry Duke Baldwin. But something terrible happened. In an instant, her father's heavy palm landed squarely on the young girl's cheek, and she immediately turned red from the blow. The man said it was predictable. It was his mistake to put his hopes on someone like her. The Count called his daughter a useless piece of trash. The girl touched her cheek, which was burning with pain. My father said that, although it was annoying, it was okay, there was still a chance. A new wave of fear gripped Yuri. She looked at her father with pain and fear. She asked him what he was going to do since there was still a chance. The Count said that if a horse gets sick, the solution is quite simple. You just need to find a new one. It immediately became clear who Count Crimson had in mind. He was referring to Nadia Hesse. The capital simply sparkled, as if it were its finest hour. The heart of the country, where entry is permitted only with the permission of the imperial family. In the midst of the long-awaited spring, the debutante ball began. Since this is an event where girls who have reached adulthood officially declare themselves to society, all the aristocrats of the empire gather here. For this day, many outfits were sewn for wonderful ladies, and invitations were sent to every corner of the empire. Greetings to members of the imperial family occur only once. In a place where only perfection is allowed, many years of work are confirmed. Lady Nadia stood before the most important people in the empire. The girl was wearing a wonderful dress. The girl bowed elegantly, lifting the hem of her dress. The emperor and empress sat on thrones. Looking down on Nadia Hesse, the empress raised her hand. And just one movement easily decides the fate of every family. The empress looked at Nadia. Hesse responded to the empress's haughty gaze with a calm one of her own. The emperor rose from his throne and approached the empress. He extended his hand to his wife. The emperor congratulated all the ladies, on behalf of the empire, on reaching adulthood. May the honor of this day be the light that illuminates their lives even more brightly. May their new path be blessed. The emperor addressed the heirs of the empire and ordered them to enjoy every moment on stage to the fullest. Baron Hesse was simply dripping with tears and snot. The man was crying. He was addressing Nadia. It seemed like only yesterday she was a tiny little thing, and now she's grown so big that she even bows before His Majesty the Emperor. Nadia said it must have been difficult for her parents to travel such a long way. The girl thanked her parents for coming, and her mother said it was their duty. The Baroness's already wrinkled hand reached out towards her daughter. On the contrary, they are very happy to see that Nadia has grown into such a wonderful girl. The mother smiled. She thanked her daughter for the invitation and said that their little girl was the most beautiful in the world. A blush appeared on the young lady's cheeks. She was very pleased to hear such a thing from her mother. Without thinking twice, she followed Arhi's advice and accepted her beauty. Father continued to cry, and Mother kept ordering him to stop crying. In the distance, the girl noticed her wonderful friends, Arcus and Lady Crimson. The young Duke said Yuria had done a great job. The rehearsals had paid off. Yuri thought she'd die of nervousness. She was so afraid of making a mistake. It wasn't so obvious, so Ar told her not to worry. He decided to find out if anything had happened. He noticed the girl's cheek. She hadn't managed to completely hide the bruise. The girl started making excuses. She said she'd accidentally scratched herself while checking her makeup, so everything was fine and would heal quickly. The guy didn't even know whether to believe the girl or not. She's certainly clumsy, but not that clumsy. Yuri asked if it was very noticeable, to which Arkish replied that it was not at all. The girl felt very uneasy, as if she were living yesterday again. The debutante ball was a magnificent sight. Wonderful ladies in wonderful dresses, a social atmosphere, and a very important day. The girl thought that her father hadn't arrived yet, and the thought made her feel better. Lady Crimson remembered her father's words. If a horse is sick, the solution is quite simple. All he had to do was change the horse for a new mare. The girl still didn't understand what he meant, but she clearly knew it wasn't going to be anything good. Uriah also remembered the words her father said after his terrible act. Lady Crimson's mood immediately soured. Her father's shadow loomed large over her. She was always alone. Even her own father was never there. Only Arhis. A bunch of young couples were dancing at the ball. It looked very romantic and impressive. The silhouette of the exquisite Lady Nadia made its way through the crowd of dancing couples. Lady Hess was looking for Henry. This child couldn't be late. Suddenly, someone called out to Lady Hess. The girl immediately looked back. The voice was unfamiliar, but the girl immediately recognized the face. It would be a sin not to recognize such a lady. The girl instantly gathered all her manners and all her elegance into a gesture of greeting. Lady Hess bowed gracefully to the lady and said that it was a great honor for her to meet her. The girl became very nervous. She was worried about her appearance and the quality of the greeting. The girl to whom Lady Hess so eloquently paid her respects turned out to be Charlotte Cardia, the first princess of the Cardia Empire. The girl looked both elegant and bold. She told Nadia that they had finally met. The first princess ordered the girl to raise her head, and the lady obeyed. Lately, society has been talking only about her. The princess was curious to see just how extraordinary Nadia was. It only takes one glance to understand that being the center of attention is a usual thing for Lady Hess. The princess said that was certainly not bad. In fact, she wanted to ask Nadia something. She believes that in such situations, it's best to listen to the opinions of those involved. Charlotte Cardia is planning to propose to Duke Baldwin. How will Nadia respond? Certainly, there is no one in the entire empire more worthy of being more base to Her Majesty than Duke Baldwin. She heard that Nadia was Baldwin's lover. Would she really agree so easily? Nadia said that for her, the will of Her Majesty is above her own feelings. The first princess found this answer completely boring. It was too banal. The princess said that when feelings take over the mind, it collapses. But Nadia revealed that Her Highness will not marry Duke Baldwin. It turns out that the Baldwin family has been called the Sword of the Empire since ancient times. The sword protects the heir, not stands by his side. This belief, known to everyone, has never been violated since the founding of the empire. Nadia knows that Her Highness values the empire more than anyone else would disturb the order. Suddenly, the first Princess Charlotte suddenly burst into hysterical laughter. Charlotte said that, as the daughter of an ordinary baron, she thinks with extreme fearlessness, and the princess said something she rarely says to many. She told Nadia that she liked her. The princess asked Nadia how this girl knew that Charlotte was testing her. Lady Hess said she was in no position to judge Her Highness's intentions. She merely trusted her as the future monarch. Good. The princess told Nadia that for a girl who had just made her debut at the ball, she was quite smart. Amazing. Who would have thought that such a person would appear in the Hess family, which was on the brink of destruction? The princess considered Baron Hess to be a lucky man since they found such a gift in the forest. The emperor sat and was bored at the ball until he saw someone he was really looking forward to. A simple snow-white girl appeared. Her name was Tasha. It was she the emperor was waiting for. He asked the girl where she had been since she had only just appeared. She said she had been observing his noble appearance, because if the emperor couldn't find her, she would, because her gaze was always fixed on him. Then the man said he would do everything in his power, so that he could find her anywhere and never lose her again. Lady Hess watched the emperor and the girl unknown to her, and wondered who she was. The princess seemed to read her mind, and said that this lady was Mistress Tasha. She was the emperor's wife. Lady Hess recalled her conversation with Vivian. She'd heard that the emperor had been obsessed with his favorite concubine lately. Apparently, that was the cause of so many problems. They say he's too infatuated with a woman to be interested in politics. And his strained relationship with the empress has been going on for years. So what happened? The imperial couple Nadia remembers before her death at least seemed to respect each other. Princess Charlotte noticed something and decided that she should leave. Duke Baldwin approached them. He said he knew Her Highness would be here. The Duke and Princess conversed as if they were brother and sister. Charlotte confronted him about his lateness. He should have been there for his beloved at such important moments. The Duke said he would handle it himself. The Princess began to leave, but the Duke asked what she had discussed with Lady Hesse, to which she replied that it was women's secrets. Charlotte wished them a wonderful time and left, leaving the couple alone. The man started peppering Nadia with questions. He asked what had happened while he was gone. She said everything was fine. Surely she couldn't say they'd talked about his marriage. The Duke chuckled and said that the princess always did as she pleased. Lady Hesse was surprised. The girl wondered about the relationship between the princess and Henry. Were they friends? They seemed quite close. After these thoughts, the girl felt strange, and the Duke noticed it. He asked how the girl was feeling. She said she was fine. The girl assumed she felt ill because she was so worried. The Duke accepted this answer.